Okay, I'm going to do a little bit of an intro, usually longer than I usually do, because this is kind of a special broadcast for me. And I tried to, I've got your books in the background there, but I put them on and they don't completely fit the screen. And then I played with it for an hour and then said, I've got a 14-year-old kid, so I gave up. But it's better than nothing.
Yeah, they look good.
Yeah. Okay, so you ready? Let's go.
All right, let's do it.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Today, this is Grant Cameron, and I have a super special guest that I've been longing to interview for quite a while. As a little bit of an intro, I've always seen the UFO situation as a chess game. It's basically, to me, when I had my sightings in 1975, the second night I saw it, it was just doing nothing. It was just there. And I wondered, what the heck is going on here? I figured I was just a guy from the middle of Canada, didn't really know, have background, and I figured somebody's got to know what's going on. So I've always been watching this game like a chessboard, and I've always tried to figure out what's important to watch, what's not important to watch, and my only intention is to try to figure this thing out. In 2012, I had, as people know, I had a download experience watching Colin Andrews' lecture. And at that point, I suddenly realized that you could actually get material from the field. This is what I call it, the field. That it's everything isn't just rational analytical thought. That you can actually at some point pop into the field, get the material and bring it back, because that's what happened to me. And I was so blown away. I started to look on the internet, and the first thing that I came across was I realized that Paul McCartney from the Beatles had gotten the song Yesterday in a dream. And it came to him, he got up on a piano and he played this thing, and he ran around for a month and talked to people, trying to get people to say, did you hear this song? He thought somebody had played this song. He was sure that this was not his creation. And then I realized that a lot of people, and I wrote a book called Inspired, the Paranormal World of Creativity, where I look at all sorts of inventions and all sorts of different people, Nobel Prizes and stuff like that, and realized that a lot of people were pulling this stuff out of the field. And so instead of scientific beliefs, where you get a scientific belief and then you look for proof to back up what you do, I've spent the vast majority of the time since 2012 trying to find people who have been in the field. Rather than sitting there and trying to figure it out for yourself or guess at it or whatever, there's people who have answers that people on the outside don't have. And that's why I've always been so interested in experiencers, because it's quite evident to me that you can look at all the lights in the sky you want and count them and get their colors and their shapes and their sizes, how fast they're moving. But it's not until you actually talk to an experiencer, someone who's actually interacted with the intelligence behind the phenomena, that we're ever going to figure out how this thing works. And I've pushed this for years and years and years. And I'll tell people, you've got to listen to the experiencers. You've got to listen. These people know stuff that they're talking to the intelligence. They know what's going on. And then I'll do the whole spiel. And then the person will look at me and say, so when do you think the government's going to disclose? And it's like, oh my goodness, it's like God save the Queen. I mean, the ship's taking on water. It's one of these things that I've had a hard time, that we've got to get over this idea that this is anecdotal. These people, experiencers, have extremely important material that will help us solve the UFO situation. So as I said, I spend most of my time looking at people. And tonight I have Debra Jordan Kauble on, who is one of the key experiencers, I think, in the whole situation of what's actually going on. And she was the subject of the book Intruders by Bud Hopkins, which was one of the most famous UFO books ever written. She just came out with a new book on her own, and she actually had two books. The other one I read, it's around here somewhere. Abducted was the other book that she and her sister wrote. And now Debra has come out with her own book called Extraordinary Contact. And she's here, and I'm going to ask her questions, because this is what it's about. It's about finding people who have the answers. And I think I've spent a lot of time in the last week listening to almost everything I could find that Debra has talked about in lectures and interviews. And she has tremendous amount of material. I would encourage everybody to read Extraordinary Contact or listen to Debra's lectures. She has some stuff that will help us solve this mystery. Now, her experience occurred in 1983. And so whenever I sort of interview people, I always look at the major experiences, and I look at, did the experience happen on an event that had to do with nuclear weapons? And I would say that the vast majority of major UFO incidents have some sort of nuclear connection. There's something happening somewhere in the world that has to do with nuclear. So Deb's experience, her first experience we'll talk about, was June the 30th, 1983. And on June the 30th, 1983, there was actually two nuclear events that took place. One was at Elmsbaum nuclear power plant in Argentina, where there was a level 4 accident, nuclear loss of coolant, and we don't really know because that was under a military dictatorship at the time. And so we don't really know what happened after that. And the second one was a nuclear event that happened at Philipsburg in Germany, where there was a nuclear leakage, and iodine 131 was put into the atmosphere. So you have these bizarre little connections. And the other weird connection, and then I'll bring in Deb to talk a little bit. Deb has the same birthday as my son, Chad, my only son, February 17th. So I found that was kind of weird. And then I'll bring in Deb. And Deb, do you think, can you maybe guess the year my son was born?
1959.
No, a major event in your life?
83.
83. My son was born February 17th, 1983. So
I was going to say, you're not old enough to be my parents. So.
Yeah.
Because that's when I was born, 59.
59. Yeah, I was 54. So I'm a little bit older, and maybe not as smart. And that's one of the things I had sort of thought, and I'll maybe get into this, that there's this idea, you probably know, there's this idea that we may have agreed to this before we came into the world. And I came in a little bit before you, but we all sort of came in about the same time. We all started to play the game. My first experience was 1975. Bud joined the circus in 1975. Travis Walton was abducted late in 1975. And I think you had the experience with the pregnancy in 1977. So you slept in a little bit, but I think we all sort of came in on this little game. And that'd be my first question. Do you think that there is this idea of soul contract, that we've come here to do something, and that this is a lot less random than people think it is? Because you go back to 75. Most people thought in 75 that this was random. I mean, if you saw a UFO, you just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, or the right place at the right time. And we now know that's crazy. I mean, with 75, if you had said, like you, that you'd seen two UFOs, or you'd had two events, even the people in the UFO community wouldn't talk to you because you're totally crazy. I mean, you don't have two events. You're lucky if you have one.
Mm-hmm. Oh, the people in the MUFON didn't want to have anything to do with us. When I met Bud, he reached out to them, and as soon as they, we had the trace landing, we had the mark in the yard and all that. But when they heard about the other kind of contact, they were, Walt Andrus was not a fan. He didn't really want to get involved with anybody that had claimed to have seen an alien. And we did actually talk to Dr. Hynek, because, we were in Indianapolis. So we were not too far away from the Center for UFO Studies in Illinois. And Bud had given me his phone number. It was the emergency 24-hour UFO hotline. Yeah. And Mom and I, it was after June 30th, 83. It was in 84. And we had this huge boomerang shaped thing come over the house. Mom and I both were standing outside on the porch right under it. And when we got our wits about us again, I called that number, and Dr. Hynek answered. It was like 11 o'clock at night or some crazy hour. And so, we did drawings for him, and we talked to him on the phone. And my mother, I don't know if it was that night or if it was another phone call, but I remember my mom saying that Dr. Hynek even said to her, he was a skeptic when he first started looking into UFO cases, but he said that he felt like he was almost getting the feeling that not everybody was able to see these things. Yeah. Because we were shocked that we lived in Indianapolis. This is where this all happened, in Indianapolis, Indiana. It's a big city, like number 11 in the country, millions of people. The house where this happened was 15 minutes from downtown Indy. So when this giant thing that filled up the whole sky was over our house at very low, just above the treetops, wouldn't you think that, you know, a whole lot of people would have seen it and reported it? So we were looking, you know, on TV news and listening to the radio, and then, you know, checking through the newspapers the following day. And we couldn't believe that nobody had reported anything. And it was like, what is going on here? And then Dr. Heineck had come up with that. So
yeah, that was one of the questions I was going to ask you about the triangle. And that was like my second experience. My first one, I just sort of fell off the edge of the earth when I saw it the first time, but 2 nights later we went out, and that's when it came at me. So it flew right at me. And there was a bunch of kids and people were swearing and jumping up and down. And the guy had a camera and he was unloading this camera as this thing was coming at us. And then it made this sort of turn. It moved off into the northeast. And then I looked at it, and it was like 40 years later, I'm thinking to myself, why did it not just go from the west into the northeast? Why did it come at me, make the turn, and then go to the northeast? And it was because that was the idea I had. And it led me to the question about your triangle is what was it doing? Like, well, mine wasn't doing anything. So when the triangle, like you said, this triangle went, correct, and then it came back again and came over you. So it was like what was the triangle doing? It was,
well, as it drifted over the house, I first spotted it when I was coming home on the way home from a late night run for some nail polish remover, some ridiculous. Yeah. I just operated like that. Yeah. And so I saw the lights in the sky coming at my direction, and my first instinct was, oh, it's from Indianapolis, you know, from the big airport, and it's just the headlights on the plane or a big headlight. But it did some weird stuff, and I began to, as it got closer to me, it looked like it was coming towards Mom and Dad's house. I got excited, so I hurried up, pulled in the driveway, ran in, hollered at my mom to come out on the porch. This thing was about to go over the house, and you had to see it because it was amazing and huge. And that's when it came directly over us. We were standing on the porch looking up, and it like just, there was like a real low hum, I mean, kind you can more like feel than hear almost, but it wasn't very loud. And it kind of glided over the house, and it just kind of went over us. I remember looking at my mom, and she was standing there with her mouth just hanging open, and she was saying, "Oh my God, that's so beautiful." And I'm thinking to myself, woman, you are out of your mind. I was freaking out. So as it went over the house, I ran through the house to the back, out the back door. As I got out the back door, I could see it coming, you know, clearing over the roof. I watched it go out east of the house a little bit. And then I watched it. It was kind of like a little bit east and north of the house at that point where it was moving, because it kind of went at a slight angle, and then it just twisted. Instead of making a banking turn like you'd think a big giant jet would, it just kind of twisted on its axis and started coming back the other way. It was not coming directly at me though, like yours. It was a little more to the north of me, but it was going right back towards downtown Indianapolis. And I'm watching it, and that's when, and I knew it was like, it should have been right over 465, which is the loop around the city, Shadeland Avenue, the Ford Motor Plant. That it should have been right about all over those areas. Like hundreds of people at least would see this thing. Nothing. So I don't know what the whole point of it was. I don't know what the whole point of it was.
Did you think that it knew that you were watching it because it lit up or something over top of you?
It got, as soon as it got, yes, when I could only see the white lights in the front, and then I can't remember if it was one light and turned into two, or two lights that turned into one. It did something that an airplane headlight can't do. Yeah. That was my cue. But when it got directly over us, we were standing on the porch, and that's when my mom said, "Oh my God, that's beautiful," because just as it got right above us, the bottom lit up like a Christmas tree. You could almost feel it kind of go, you know, when it lit up. Yeah. And I remember some small balls of light. And like I said, it was kind of boomerang-y shaped, you know, more than triangular. I thought I could see like a small black box part on the back that was not lit, before the bottom lit up. Mom did not see that. All she saw was the boomerang shaped part, but you know, her eyes were 25 or 30 years older than mine. So, and it was dark out. But once the lights lit up, there were little dots of white light under it, circles of white light, and then bands like fluorescent tubes of light on it. And then there was a white light in the middle with the red light in the middle of that on the underside where the two wings, like, you know, met there, and it just lit up. And that's when my mom said, "Oh my God, that's beautiful." And that's when I said, "Oh, hell no, I'm not doing this." No. And that's when it went over the house in my mind. And I do this all the time. I didn't want to see it, but I didn't want to not see it because I needed to know where it was,
Yeah.
you know, in relationship to me. I don't know why. You know, I'm not like that now, but I was then. I was 23 years old and I was scared out of my wits. I didn't understand what was going on, what was happening to me, why it was happening to me. Sometimes I still don't know whether I fully understand or not, but I feel more comfortable with it being a part of me now. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because we don't have lights on our planes, and the thing lights up right above you. It's like you actually talked to Bud about his sighting, his 63 or 64 sighting, and it's like the same thing. What was it doing? It was doing nothing. It was just sitting above the car, and he's riveted to this thing with these people from Britain or whoever was with him. And then he goes back the next day and he retraces the route. How long did it take? How long was it there? And you sort of drag him down the rabbit hole. And when you start looking at Bud's life, I don't know if you know these stories. Do you know Bud was involved in War of the Worlds?
no.
The broadcast? He was a 7-year-old boy. War of the Worlds. He lived in New Jersey. The story was centered in New Jersey. And his parents had War of the Worlds on. And they were freaking out. His mother was really freaking out. Bud was looking out the window, 7-year-old kid, and he's looking out to see if they're coming. And this is where I always thought where the fear came from Bud about the fear of this invasion thing. And the neighbor came with his guns and he said, "Come on, we're going up to the hill. We're gonna defend ourselves." And Bud's father said, "No, he wouldn't go." But that's when you see that story, then you link that story together, and then you link the story of how Bud got involved in 75. So I got involved in May, and Bud came in a little bit after, a couple of months after, and that was the guy, you know, the story about the guy with the liquor store that,
Yeah.
that Bud was talking. And here's this story of him telling Bud, there's these beings get out, 9 to 11 beings, and they got bags and they start gathering soil. And it's like, what kind of stupid story is this? I mean, they've come across the galaxy and they've got 11 bags of soil, and then they go back in and they take off. And that's what Bud got involved with the apartment block, which was called the Stonehenge apartment block, where he is now down the rabbit hole, and suddenly he couldn't get out. I mean, then he was very interested, and it's almost like they do these events to sort of keep you interested. You can't let it go. It makes no sense or whatever, but it just something you can't let go of.
I always, you know, I have a very vivid memory of sitting in his studio. Might have been the first time I went to New York, or could have been the second time, but he was showing me boxes upon boxes of letters that people had written to him from missing time, reading missing time. And I said to him, my letter was in this box. Why was my letter the one that you decided to answer? Why was my story the one you decided to investigate? You know, and then at that point he was first starting to talk about maybe writing Intruders. He said, "Kid, I don't know. That's the $64,000 question." And I said, "You suppose it could be destiny?" And he goes, "I don't know." He wasn't a big believer in stuff like that, but I asked him, I said, "Have you ever seen aliens? Have you maybe been abducted?" And he's like, "Oh no, no." And I'm like, "Are you sure? Because you're really into it. I mean, you are really, I mean, because when he investigated our case, he was so thorough. I mean, it took 3 years before he even started writing on Intruders, you know, and he did all kinds of things. I mean, he came out to the house multiple times, interviewed neighbors, coworkers, friends. You know, he would go knocking on doors, and my mom was probably like, "Oh my God, he's going to tell the neighbors." But, you know, I mean, he was just so thorough and everything. And I'm like, there has to be a reason why somebody is so driven to something like you are with this. There has to be a reason. And I said, are you sure you've never been? He goes, I'm sure.
And
I
then he did,
saw one time and that's it.
and then he did the paintings. He did the paintings.
The Guardians.
Yeah.
I have one. He gave me a collage, the cutouts one that he did about that big and it survived the tornado, thank God. And then I have like a lithograph of a drawing of another Guardian that his ex-wife Carol gave me.
Yeah.
And but yeah, the Guardians were just amazing, and all those big circle things. It just, I don't know, it just made me feel like there maybe was something more with him than I ever was gonna know.
Like later on, I want to get into apports, but let's go to another thing that fit with Bud, which was kind of a weird thing, is the day, remember you sent him a 14-page letter expressing this stuff, and your mother had reticence about mailing it. So what happens the day Bud phones? What happens in your house?
Well, I had gone out with friends earlier that night. And when I remember coming back in, and my mom she used to fall asleep on the couch all the time. She'd fall asleep on the couch watching TV. And they had this big giant, they had the furniture that everybody sees on the internet from the 80s, that brown flower stuff. Okay. And they had the coffee table and the end tables. The coffee table was so big and heavy, it literally took 2 people to move it. So whenever mom wanted to move the furniture around the living room, she could not do it without help. And I know the coffee table moved while she was there, but she did not move it. And we knew that it moved that night because they had like that funky orange shag carpet stuff. And it made a dent. The coffee table made a big dent in the carpeting. So when it was moved, you could see where the coffee table had been. And it's like, I'm like, why did you move this table? And she hadn't moved it. And she said to me, that guy who wrote that book that you wrote, that you had me mail that letter to, he called while you were gone. And I, what? And I froze in my tracks, and my heart started to race. And she said, his phone number's over there, you can call him back. And he said, you could call back late. I told him I didn't know what time you'd be back. And I was thinking in my head, do I want to do this? Do I want to do this? Do I really want to do this? And so, and I do remember my heart pounding, racing. I could feel it beating in my throat and my hand shaking as I dialed the phone number. And then he answered, and that was it. Off we were to the races, so to speak.
To probably one of the most famous stories. So let's go to the June 30th, the one that caused you to write the letter, that sort of when you had some experiences before, but that's when sort of like they wake you up. It's sort of like there's little clues, but then it's like, okay, wake up time, here we go. So let's go through that night. And there's a couple times I want to stop you. There's a couple of things that happened during that night I want to question about, but tell the story of what happened on the 30th.
Okay. I was living there at the house with mom and my 2 kids and my dad, because I was recently divorced and my kids were little at the time. And I was getting ready to go cut patterns for a friend of mine who was a seamstress that made costumes. So we had dinner, and I was at the kitchen sink washing my hands, and I was kind of looking out the window, and I happened to notice that they had a built-in swimming pool, like an Esther Williams, underground cement pond kind of swimming pool. Yeah. And it had a pump house next to it where the pump was. And it was probably about roughly the size of like an aluminum mini barn that you can buy in at the hardware store, one of those about that size. It wasn't that big. Anyway, I noticed the door was open, ajar, and there was a light on in it. And I thought, did I leave that light on? No, I didn't leave that light on. And I thought there was something weird about the light, but at that time, it didn't really register with me. That in retrospect now, I realized that the light was more of a fluorescent light instead of an incandescent light. So the color was a little different. So it was a brighter. And I thought, that's weird. And I pointed it out to mom, and she wasn't concerned. And so I got in my car a few minutes later, maybe 5 minutes. The house was a sandstone tri-level, and it had a driveway when you come up the front one section of the driveway went down to the garage, and the other section of the driveway went down the side of the house, along the side of the swimming pool, to a turnaround that was in front of Dad's workshop back there, where he restored Indian motorcycles, and he did radio control. He made models and stuff. So it was it was as big as probably a 1,500 square foot house back there, his workshop. It was pretty cool. Anyway, I decided I'd go down that side road and just have a peek before I left, because I was leaving. Daddy worked second shift, so he wasn't home. And I was leaving my kids with my mom. I'm thinking burglars, specifically the workshop in the back, but so I thought, well, I'll do a little quick whip around the turnaround before I leave. And when I did, I noticed that the pedestrian door on the attached garage, the garage that was attached to the house, was open. And I knew that had been closed earlier because I'd put my dog in there. And, but instead of stopping, I just went ahead and went on to my friend's house. She lived one street over. So it took 2 minutes. And when I got there, I called Mom and I told her what I'd seen. And she said, don't worry about it. I'll just lock the doors and until your dad gets home. So I hung up the phone. And as soon as I hung it up, she called right back. And I answered the phone and I'm like, what's up? And she says, I need you to come home right now. And she sounded scared, which was something my mom never did. I never heard her be scared before. And so it kind of panicked me a little bit. And I think it showed in my voice when I was talking to Mom, because my girlfriend's husband was overhearing our conversation, and he yells over my shoulder, tell her to call the sheriff. That's what we pay him for, or the police. And she heard him and she said, no, I don't want anyone here but you. Now, it was a week later before she remembered why she called me back. She had seen a light around the bird feeder, a ball of light, a basketball size, but she didn't
How far would she have been
remember.
away from it? Can you tell me how far she would have been away from the ball of light?
I'm kind of not that great with distance, but maybe 25, because it was just outside the kitchen window.
So pretty close.
Maybe 25 feet, maybe something like that. So anyway, I came back home. I told my friend, look, I got to go home and check it out. And, I'll let you know what's going on. So I went back home and I pulled up the side of that house there and went to the patio room because Mom was there. And I walked in and I grabbed my dad's shotgun, which Mom says, that's not loaded, right? And I said, of course I know. I'm the one that asked him not to keep it loaded while we're here. But whoever I find out there isn't going to know that it's not loaded until I'm close enough to hit him with it. So, I grabbed it and I went out there, and that was out of character for me. At that point in my life, I was not brave like that. I would do that now, but back then, no. But anyway, so I went out looking around. I checked out the pump house. Didn't see anything. The light was gone, off. I walked back behind the swimming pool, and I did find my dog, who I knew had been in the garage. She was under Dad's ladder truck, but she would not come out. Everything looked secure. The doors looked secure at the shop. So I went to the back. I headed towards the garage, open garage door that was attached to the house. And I thought, if there's anybody out here, this is where they are. So I walk in and flip the light on, and there's no one in there, but I do see his mattresses leaned up against the wall on one side. And I think, okay, well, someone could hide behind that. So I'm like Elmer Fudd going around this mattress with this unloaded shotgun, spewing profanities like a sailor. And all of a sudden I feel hot. I felt like I had a hot flash, and I felt like my skin was hot, like I was burning. And I thought, oh, I got to get out of here right now. And I turned to run towards that open pedestrian door. And as soon as I got to the open doorway, something hit me right here, like my chest belly area.
Yep.
And it was like this most intense ball of light. And I could feel it spread through me. And it was so bright that I could see it through my eyes. I know my eyelids were closed, but I could still see it. It was that bright, and it hurt my eyes, and I could feel it slowly spread through my legs and my arms, around my head. And I felt like I was vibrating. It was beyond shaking, like vibrating to the point where I was like vibrating apart. It almost felt like I could almost sense every individual molecule that made me up. And then I don't know how long it lasted. my mind says I couldn't have tolerated that for long, but I had no sense of how long that lasted. And then when it stopped, I was outside the door on the cement patio. And I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I could move my eyes, but I couldn't see. My vision had like splotches in it, like a flash bulbs, splotchiness. And I felt somebody pulling on my shoulder, this shoulder, my right shoulder, from behind me. I felt something in my ear that felt like a hot, like knitting needle or something in my ear.
It was in the right ear?
My right ear.
Okay.
And it's weird. Like I've had COVID and that ear keeps getting these phantom pains in it now since I had COVID. But anyways, that's the ear. And it, so anyway, I heard the voice. I didn't see anybody, but I heard a voice say, "It's unfortunate that you felt this pain." And I'm thinking, I see movement in front of me. And I think I see kids in mom's yard, mom, dad's backyard, the 6 of them. And they're coming from all different areas of the backyard. And they're kind of lining up off to my left, up by the, where the pool and the driveway meet, the gate to the pool and the driveway meet up in that area. And they're kind of lining up there. And I'm thinking to myself, why are all these kids in mom's backyard? This isn't making any sense. And they lined up and they kind of slid towards me. They didn't walk and they weren't really, I don't know, it was more like a glide down across the yard. And they weren't coming at me, but they were coming toward my direction across the backyard. And as I watched them, that's when I saw that thing in the yard. Again, I can't move. I can't run. I can't scream, but I can see this thing. We call it a craft because I don't know what else to call it, but common sense dictates that 6 of anybody small, or anybody can't fit in this thing and fly any distance from somewhere, because it wasn't much bigger than the pump house of the swimming pool, like the mini barn, and it was egg shaped.
Okay. Can I add something here at this point? I don't know if, how much literature you've read with experiences, but Chris Bledsoe, are you familiar who Chris Bledsoe is?
I know the name. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So he had a object, egg shaped. He went in it, he flew the craft. And so I'm getting him to describe what happens. And he said, as soon as I went inside the craft, it was at least 10 times bigger inside the craft than it was outside the craft. If you follow Terry Lovelace, who is a lawyer, he said it was a size of a football stadium inside the craft. In the regular side craft, when it went inside, it was the size of a football stadium. And then I had a friend who's an experiencer out of Utah, who the being took him to the spirit world. He's with his dead mother in the spirit world, and he gets taken to a building that he said looked like a temple in Nephi, Utah. And he said, and she took me into this building, and she said, when you die, you're going to get a room in this building. And he said, I walked in the building, he said, and it was at least 10 times the size inside as outside. And I said, well, that's what the UFO people say as well. And so it's this idea that in this world that they live in, it's possible. Even Hal Puthoff said, that was the thing that puzzled him. He said, I'd like to know how the craft can be bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. So you see it, but it still could be like the size of a football stadium inside. Just I don't know if you read this stuff, but because I remember you're always talking about this object thing, and you'll hear this thing that there's a being inside an orb that's only a foot across or something like that. And it's this idea that time and space seem to fall apart once you get into their world and go through the door.
Exactly. I know. Yes, absolutely. It's what this world around us isn't what we think it is. I'm just saying.
Yeah. So go ahead, keep going.
So anyway, so I'm getting blasted by that light. Then I'm outside the doorway and I feel the burning in my ear and the pulling on my shoulder. Then I saw the thing is egg shaped, but in front of it, maybe 20 feet or so, maybe 20 feet, 25 feet in front of me is a ball of light the size of a basketball, but it's very soft and it doesn't appear to be attached to anything. I'm not sure. I can't see clear, real good, but I know that it's about as tall off the ground as I am. And I'm 5'3", and it went down really slow. And then it came back up and then it stopped where it started. And I got the distinct impression that it was somehow looking at me or something, or scanning me or something. I don't know why. I thought it was looking at me. And then, trigger seeing them, what I thought were kids in the yard, I guess triggered me like, oh my God, my kids, they're in this house. And I freak out a little bit and, are they safe? And immediately the voice says, your children are fine, that I shouldn't worry about them. Then the next thing I remember is hearing my name. The clincher is that I didn't learn it till later, but it was actually my mom who had stuck her head out the kitchen door and called my name. And it was like somebody snapped their fingers. As soon as I heard my name, boom, everything I just remembered that, I'm told you, was gone, like wiped. And I don't know if the light wiped my mind or the ball of light was wiping my mind. I don't know. All I know is that as soon as I heard my name being called, all of that went away. I remember turning and I could walk. And I remember walking across the patio and up the steps to the upper porch where the kitchen door was. And Mom says, is everything okay? And I said, yeah, everything's cool. But in my mind, I'm thinking, I don't want to cut patterns anymore. I want to swim. I just want to get wet. I just felt like I wanted to go swimming and get in the pool. So I got a hold of my friend. I'm like, hey, how about let's do this instead? It was almost 4th of July weekend. So it was warm out. The pool was open. We were swimming in the evenings on hotter days. And she's like, yeah, that'd be fine. So her and her daughter came over. And I can't remember whether I went over there and got them or if they came back. It's been 38 years, but I know they have ended up at my house. And I remember the three of us walking across the backyard to get to the swimming pool. And her daughter steps on something in the yard. And we thought she stepped on a bee or something because she said it burned. And then she said her foot was numb or it's tingled or and then felt like her foot was getting numb. And then the numbness was going up her leg. So when we got to the pool, we looked it over and we didn't see anything. And her mother was of the mind like, well, cool pool water, it'll make it feel better if you stepped on a stinger and it fell out or something. So we're in the pool. We're not in the pool very long, maybe 10 minutes or so. I can't remember exactly, but I know that I bit the lights. It was dark out now and the outside lights on. I started noticing halos around them. And it's like when you're a kid and you went swimming and you opened your eyes underwater a whole bunch and then your chlorine kind of messed them up. So that's what it seemed like to me, except I hadn't gotten my head under the water and gotten chlorine in my eyes. But the lights all had like white halos around them and my eyes were burning and I felt nauseous. And come to find out, so did they. They both felt nauseous too. Their vision wasn't messed up, but they didn't feel good. So at one point, my friend Deanna's like, hey, let's go to White Castle. Maybe we get something to eat. We'll feel better. White Castle's is like this 24-hour little square burger joint, Crystal Burgers or something like that too. Well, we didn't end up doing that. They ended up going home and I ended up going to bed. When I woke up the next morning, my eyes were swelled up shut and hurt so bad. I was in so much pain that my mom took me to the emergency room and we got there. And I have no idea why, but an actual eye doctor was in the emergency room area. And I don't know why he would even be in there, but he was. Because I remember them talking to my mother, saying, if you could take her across the street to my office, across the street, I have better, equipment there. I can look at her better and figure out what's going on. Could you bring her over there? So Mom took me over there and his nurses and whatnot worked me in right away. And the first thing he asked me was, have you looked into the arc of a welder's torch? And I said, no. And mind you, I didn't tell anybody about the light because at that point I hadn't remembered it. I had trouble sleeping. I felt sick. I didn't feel good, but I didn't remember that. So he prescribed cream, some gooey tube of stuff and drops, and my eyes were never right after that. And as a side note, in my 30s, I was diagnosed with macular degeneration and cataracts. And by the time I hit 50, I had all brand new acrylic lenses installed in my eyes because mine were wiped. But
Let me just stick a point in there. In 1975, we had the sightings for about a year. The National Enquirer came up, Bob Pratt, and I took him around. One of the cases we had there was two principals. One was you've got Amish people. This is like the Hutterites. I don't know if you have Hutterites down there, but the one was a principal of a Hutterite colony. So this is a pretty conservative woman.
We have Amish and
Amish,
Mennonite
yeah.
here,
So it's basically the same sort of thing. So this is the principal of that school, and another woman who's a principal of another school coming across country. Won't get into the whole story, but the one woman is driving. They're both freaking out. This thing's on top of the car. The one woman's looking out. She had eye problems. The other one was, if you look, the Caleres. People always want to bring up the Caleres, the evil aliens at Caleres, Brazil in 1977, where all these people are seeing these things and people are being zapped by these beams and stuff like that. And as soon as they brought in the Air Force into the situation, everything stopped with the people. And the Air Force was filming this. It was every night this thing would fly around the Air Force people. They weren't attacking them, but were almost like posing for photographs. A lot of those guys had cataract problems after that from these lights. And I've had my cataracts, I've had both eyes cataracts done, but I'm not sure whether it's related because we had a lot of sightings back in 75, 76. So that I think that's pretty common, that if you're looking into this, this bright light, whatever it is, it does, from my experience, does cause these eye problems, people having these, cataract and eye problems.
I became extremely farsighted after that. And I never wore glasses before that point, but I ended up having to wear glasses because I became extremely farsighted. So I don't know what that means, but I thought that was weird too. But anyway, so I go home, a couple of days pass. I'm feeling like I'm having a nervous breakdown. I feel anxiety, and I don't, and I had anxiety issues, as a teenager and stuff growing up, but it was feeling out of control. And I was feeling very paranoid and anxious, like I was waiting for some. I would sit and watch my kids sleep at night, the little boys in the room, and wait. I couldn't go to sleep until the sun came up. And then once the sun came up, I would just collapse. I was so exhausted. Thank God for my mom at that point. And there was a bathroom window. I always tell people the bathroom window, the upstairs bathroom, overlooked the mark in the yard. And I didn't even realize the mark was there when I was starting to feel weird about that window at night. I couldn't go in there at night because I felt like something was going to pull me out the window, which I knew was crazy. But 4th of July weekend came, and the whole family gathered at the mom and dad's house, as we always did, to swim and have a cookout and stuff. And the kids all ran out the back kitchen. I remember them run out the back kitchen door to the swimming pool, and we're in there trying to prepare for the barbecue, cooking out, the hot dogs and hamburgers. And my oldest nephew, Billy, runs back in and he says, "Grandma, what's wrong with your yard?" And mom's like, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "Come and look." So us adults, we went out in the backyard to check it out. And there was that mark in the yard, and it was crazy. It was like an 8-foot diameter circle. And a part of it was kind of pushed up on one side, and there was a deep crack in it. And it had off the edge of it, it looked like a 49-foot swath that was exactly 2 feet wide all the way down and ended in this perfect arc. Looked like a giant, sounds weird, it kind of looked like a giant penis drawn in the yard like that. And the grass in it was like this grayish, the grass was like a grayish beige, and it just like laid over. It just laid over, and the ground was rock hard. And first thing out of my mom's mouth when we're all standing around here looking at this is mom goes, "Oh, that's where our UFO landed the other day." And I looked at her because it struck me weird. Everybody was giggling, but not me. It struck me weird. And I turned and looked at her, and I thought to myself, why would you say that? And then I looked back at the mark in the yard, and it was like, bam, everything started to come back. First thing I remembered was all I could see was 2 big black eyes, like superimposed over this mark in the yard, between me and the mark. And then as the minutes and hours and days passed, more and more memory of that night and the being hit in the chest by the light and the kids in the yard and that egg-shaped thing in the backyard. All that started coming back. And I also started remembering things like back in when I first got married in 78, those two gray guys came in my bedroom with that black box. I remembered that. I remembered, all kinds of little weird stuff. And I remembered Missing Time. I had picked that book up a few months before
and
I had not been able to read it. Every time I tried to read it, I'd have a panic attack and I'd have to put it down. And once or twice in a week, I literally got my mom to take me to the emergency room because I thought I was having a heart attack, and it was anxiety attack.
Yeah.
And finally, my mom's like, "You got to take this book back to the library because we can't afford to keep paying this emergency room bill." Dad had us on his insurance while we were living there. Thank you, UAW, because he could have us till I was 26. So, but yeah, and it's bad when you go to the emergency room and the doctor and people at the front desk call you by your first name. They recognize you when you walk in. That's how it was getting. I was in such a mess. But I remembered Missing Time was one of those memories that came back to me loud and clear and said, there's an address in the back of this book and you should write this guy and tell him about today, this mark in the yard and what you remember. So
can I ask you a speculative question that people have raised? I mean, do you think they were forcing you to go for help or to try to figure this thing out?
The Grays or my family?
Whoever, like with all this sort of putting these ideas, into your head, like this, the idea of the book comes into your head, or the idea of stress, because a lot of experiences, what we're saying to them is you got to go and start dealing with it, that people will try to hide it. But until you go for therapy, until you go to unravel it. And so the other question would be, did this anxiety start to fade once you started working with Bud Hopkins?
Yeah, it did. I mean, Bud saved my life. I mean, it's never completely gone away and I still have to manage it, but yeah, he made all the difference. My life, there's nothing about my life today that would be remotely recognizable had I not met him or had that experience and met him. And I don't even know that I'd even be alive, to be honest. I don't know, but and that's possible. I don't know why I remembered him and I wrote to him and reached out for help. Now, I'm the kind of person now, and I was sort of then, when something scared me, I felt like knowledge is power. So the more I could learn about whatever it was that was frightening me or bothering me, I felt less afraid. So, and I was my biggest skeptic because I did everything I could think of to figure out what could make this mark in the yard. Why would I remember, did I get hit by lightning? What was the weather like? I researched the weather. And, this was before this was before computers, cell phones, any of that stuff. I go to the library and look stuff up. I called the agricultural agent of the state of Indiana to say, hey, what would make a yard do this? What would make grass do this? I could find a lot of people that could tell me what it wasn't, but I couldn't find anybody that could tell me what it was.
Because you may be talking to some experiencers tonight. So would the message be, go for help, unravel this thing, that you will come out of it? Because people have the idea, this horrible thing is happening and how could they dare do this to you? And then when you talk to people, the longer they're in it, I think the pattern is the more you're in it, the more you understand what happened, the less fearful you become, and the more you see it more as a gift rather than some bad thing happening.
Exactly. I was, at that point in my life, I was fearful. I had anxiety. And as I remembered more and more things, I had anger and resentment and everything else because I didn't want this to happen. I didn't ask for this. I didn't go out looking for it. I wanted to be normal. I spent my entire life trying to be invisible, the queen of invisible. I wanted to just fit in and be normal. That's all I wanted. And when I met Bud, we didn't want to write it. I didn't want to be the subject of a book about this. Who the hell wanted to be famous for this kind of stuff, especially 38 years ago? Exactly. I'll pass. Thanks. I had kids to raise. But it took him a little bit to convince us to let him write the book. And that's what the pseudonyms are about, in the beginning, because I wanted to protect my family. They were supporting me. I wanted to protect my children. But and I could have stayed that way, but I chose not to. I chose to be happy. I chose to find the lessons in everything that I went through. I chose. I eventually learned that I had that power, just like Judy Garland in The Wizard of Oz, when Glinda tells her, "You've always had the power, you just didn't know it." I realized that my life was going to suck if I allowed myself to be consumed by paranoia and anxiety and anger. And I didn't want that.
Because you've been asked a number of times the question, if you had the chance to do it again, would you go through it again?
And yes, I would.
Yeah.
And for the very reason I told you just a minute ago, had I not,
Yeah.
there is nothing remotely about my life that would even be recognizable. And I like the life I have. I like the person that I have become. I mean, I'm not all that, but I'm always going to be a work in progress till the day I check out. But I feel like I'm a good person, and I've improved, and I have a good life, and I have friends and family. I had a good job for 15 years before I was able to retire. And my kids, my son, if I hadn't had that experience that led me to Bud, then my son wouldn't have met his wife at Purdue. I wouldn't have my granddaughter, nothing about anything. I wouldn't have met my late husband. I wouldn't live here where I live now. I wouldn't have the husband. I mean, you see what I'm saying? So no, I wouldn't change anything. The only thing I would change would be, if I was able to know that then what I know now, I wouldn't be as afraid. I wouldn't let it have, because I know I had injury, and I personally believe that it had something to do with that, but I don't think it was intentional. I don't believe that it was intentionally done. I've accidentally injured myself, and I know that I had the pregnancy that disappeared, and I feel in my heart somewhere that baby is, well, she'd be like 45 years old now or something like that. But I think that she's somewhere that I'll see someday. But
you did see her one other time. You did see her a little bit later, correct? Or you think?
Yeah, I remember sitting in, and it was not a dream. I wasn't asleep.
Yeah.
I was sitting in my kitchen in the apartments that I lived in. And this was, I'm trying to think, sometime, it was after June 30, 83. I'm thinking it was maybe like 88 or somewhere around in there, So I'm sitting in my kitchen at my kitchen table, looking out my patio door in my apartment. I was smoking a cigarette and drinking a cup of coffee. And I happened to notice a kid standing in each of the apartment townhouses. I lived in a townhouse. The patio had a privacy fence around it. They weren't the tightest slats. So I could see somebody, a kid standing at the door, at the gate, looking at me. And I could see her all the way down to the ground. I could see her white hair, her blue eye really stood out at me, grabbed me. And then what else grabbed me was the fact that the kid was wearing all black. And something in my head clicked, and I thought, who would dress their kid in all black, even the shoes? And then something else in me clicked in my head, the eyes. When I saw her eye, one eye looking at me through the slat, I thought, is that her? And as soon as I had that thought, I jumped up. And when I did, took off running. And I went, opened up the gate, ran out the patio door, opened up the gate. I looked back behind the apartments, up and down, didn't see anybody, ran to the edge, because I lived on the corner apartment. So I was like right there where she could turn a corner and run down the other side of the buildings. I was all over the place. That kid disappeared. And I always thought in my mind that it was her. I can't prove it, but that's what I thought.
And you had the bonding experience on the with a lot of women report, you know, where you're bond with it when it's a baby, you have to hold it. That you went through that as well with this child, right?
Yeah, it was another child. When I saw her for the first time, she was a little bigger. She didn't want to look at me, and it hurt me.
Yeah.
When she was brought in to see me, she was between two of these grays. And as soon as she saw me, it looked, she acted like the sight of me terrified her, which broke my heart. And she kind of tried to hide behind them. The bonding thing was with another one. This one was a male child who looked like he was half dead. I named him Andrew. In my head, that's what I called him. But he was very tiny, and he had dark hair and dark eyes, but he looked like he was real frail and thin.
Yeah.
And then my job was to hold him.
Yeah.
And that my holding him, somebody was telling me somehow that my holding him would make him strong.
Wow. Yeah. That's pretty common. Can I flip to another story that when you told another story about the guy on the bus, and you go into the bathroom, you see the woman, and now you described it again with the blue eyes and the hair. Do you see any relationship between those? Because when I look at this kind of stuff, I see dream signs. Like when you tell the story about the bus, I would like, all I think is, wow, I should get my assistant Desta to regress you into a theta state to go through the bus experience and say, okay, really what's going on here? Because it's these dream signs. Like when you have the bus story, it's like he knows about it. He mentions extraterrestrials. The food tastes like cardboard. You see this figure in the mirror, all these weird things, and you're going like, what's really going on here? It's like there's almost like symbolic. So did you ever see any relationship between that when you went into the bathroom and saw that woman with the blue eyes and the hair to the girl that comes to the window, or the woman that's looking at you?
That thought passed through my mind, a few times over the years. Yeah. I don't know whether that was her. The woman in the mirror had white hair and really blue eyes, and looked mostly human. And I'll never forget the color of blue that the shirt on she had was this cobalt blue that was so intense and beautiful. It was just something I'd never seen before, but it was shocking because I was expecting to see me in this mirror, and I'm like, oh, and I rub my eyes and look again, and here I am. And I remember thinking at the time, oh my God, I must be exhausted. And I've had so many people who've heard that. They, of course, they've said, you think it was the girl, or do you think it was your true self that you saw in the mirror? And I'm like, well, I don't know about that.
That's where you need the regression, where you can actually go into a state where you're getting past the sort of the screen imaging and the dream signs. That's the concept of dream signs with lucid dreaming, that when you like you have a dream and your dead mother's in the dream and stuff, and you wake up and you go, that was kind of weird, my dead mother's in the dream. And that's the whole thing, is when you get the dream signs, you realize, oh, this means something in order to become lucid, but you've got to get into a state where you can sort of ask what's really going on. Because that story, and you said you might want to do a book on the bus thing. I think that's an actual book. I mean, that is just
the whole bus trip is an actual book. If I could go into, and I mean, I remember a significant amount of details in that whole trip because it was so impactful to me. Plus I made, notes, and I wrote down journals. Part of the writing this book of Extraordinary Contact was, I'm not getting any younger. Sometimes I forget what I ate for dinner yesterday. Yeah. And I feel like there's so much in my head. I want out and on something that won't fade like my mind will. And so that my granddaughter can read it. My great grandchildren can read it, and know me, know the story from my own mouth, know where they come from, who they are. You know what I mean?
Did you know Angela Joyner?
Yes, I did.
The reporter, yeah. So I remember I worked with Angela. We actually had a sighting together when I went to her house. We were going to work on a book on the presidents. But anyway, I remember that she had a rough ride, like you. I mean, she had this sort of situation where She lost her job. She said, oh, we sort of separated. He said, no, Angela, when they put your computer in a Rolodex in a box and give it to you, they fired you. That's what happens in Canada. That's called being fired. And she
Yeah.
never did get another job again. And so I always would say to her, and I said when I lectured, that exactly what you're saying is it may be a rough life. It may be some difficult times, but 500 years from now, when everybody knows what's going on, everybody's going to say, like with you, like, Deb, that was my great, 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 great grandmother, man. She knew what was going on. And that's what I said to Angela. It may be a rough time now, but now she's died and her husband's died. And now it's a situation where this will pass on and she will go into history because she recorded what happened to her and she stood up against all odds and against her career and all this kind of stuff. And I think that's what we've got to remember is that you're recording history, that people don't know what's going on now. It's like living at the time of Christ or the signing of the Constitution or something. We were here when this all started. We were the first ones to sort of wake up and say something's going on, something's going on. And so I acknowledge and thank you for recording this and putting it down for future generations to read.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. You know, I had a dream one time, one of those lucid dreams.
Yeah.
That my like to the nth power great grandson from way in the future came back and got me because he took me to his time because they wanted to meet me. And he took me there and I remember the place was beautiful, clean, everything was white. But the one thing that stood out to my mind was how neat the toilet was.
Yeah.
Because the toilet, when you used it, it told you everything about your health. It told you, it would talk to you and say, you need to drink more water, or your vitamin such and such is low, or whatever. It assessed your health every time you use the restroom and it talked to you. And I'm like, that is the coolest toilet I've ever seen in my life.
and that's like noetic material. That's where you get material that probably will turn out to be true. You had another one and I want to go in that one. And that was about the blood. What were you told about blood?
I was told by someone, I do not know who, that the answers to the questions that we have are in our blood. And now that was back in the late 80s, early 90s. And that was in response to a question that was asked of me by some researchers who had put together this test with me and another woman who'd had the experiences who was very similar to me. And they gave us a series of questions and they wanted us to read one every night before we went to bed and went to sleep, read it 3 times. And then when we woke up in the morning, write down the first thing that came to our mind after we read it again when we woke up. And that was the answer to a question. All the questions, all the answers you seek are in the blood.
Wow. I'll give you a background on that. I started before I got into you. I was never interested in UFOs or extraterrestrial. I was interested in paranormal stuff. I was interested in Edgar Cayce. 1927. This is before they knew there was 3 different blood types in 1927, but the Rh negative, this famous alien blood type, was not discovered till 1940. Blood tests weren't started till 1940. This is what Edgar Cayce said in 1927. There is no condition existent in a body that the reflection of the same may not be traced to in the blood supply. The day will yet arrive when one may be able to take a drop of blood and diagnose the condition of any physical body. 1927. So yeah. That's a psychic, and that's where you see this. That's why I say it's so important that you journal this stuff, because you're picking up stuff that they're basically sort of showing you the future. They're showing you things that people can actually pick up on and learn from.
Yeah. I told Bud all the stuff that I remembered, and I don't think he really knew what to do with it at the time. And then a lot of it, as a researcher, some of it he wanted to keep private for control purposes, because a lot of this wasn't out in mainstream world yet, and he wanted to have some things that if questions he could ask somebody who thought they had experience, and they may come up with the same answer I had, and he didn't want him to be able to read it somewhere. I was actually told by him once he started investigation, don't be reading any more stuff about it for, a
Well,
while,
that
which
makes
I
sense.
didn't, which I never was that big of a reader. I was a reader when my kids were little because it was free, and
Yeah.
we lived across the street from the library. So I would pick up books and read. I couldn't afford cable or anything like that. But now once my eyes got wrecked, reading is such a chore. I love audiobooks. So
I'll go in a minute to your drawings. You're an artist, and Bud was an artist. I remember Roger Lear, who did the alien implants in the 17 alien implant removals. They asked
yeah.
him what was common between all experiencers. He said, "They're all right brain creative people, and there's tons of them in Hollywood." And then he said that all the implants are on the left side of the body, which means the right brain, the female right brain is runs the left side of the body. But that this idea that you were picking up this stuff. So let me see if I can take over the screen here and share screen, and we'll go to your website where people should go. Share. What the heck? Where's your website? Come on. Okay, so here's the dream to Bud. Maybe you can start with that. We're on your website here on the drawings.
Oh,
I want to go through some of these drawings, but you've had these lucid dream situations, which I also say is very important for people to listen to when a person has these types of dreams. They're usually very insightful. So tell us a story about Bud, and you have a dream about Bud after he dies.
yeah. It was weird because I'd never dreamed about him before. And, he'd been gone for quite some time. But I remember it was almost when I woke up. So it was near the end of my sleep cycle, whatever that is. And we were sitting in like I don't know, an outdoor patio place or something. And Bud was there, and he looked fabulous. He looked young and fresh and tan. And the thing that struck me was that he was wearing a Hawaiian shirt. And if you knew Bud, he'd never wear a Hawaiian shirt.
Yeah.
I think he had the same blue pinstripe shirt everywhere he went, and sweater. He had a sweater, but and, I think that I thought that the Hawaiian shirt was a symbol for something in the dream. It was to tell me something that he wasn't going to verbally tell me, because he really didn't talk to me. I said, "Oh my God, you look great." And I said, "Is that really you? Is it like I told you I thought it would be?" Because, when he found out he was going to die, he talked to me. He wrote me letters,
Yeah.
and he said, "I want you to hear this from me. I don't want you to hear this from somebody else. I've got this, and I'm going to die." And
Yeah.
and of course I was devastated, but
Yeah.
he was not, he was not a big believer in the afterlife.
Yeah.
I think he was pretty much an atheist, in that he felt like, when you died, you're just poof,
Yeah.
you're gone, and that's it. And he was okay with that. I mean, he didn't have any need to,
Yeah.
believe anything else. But I always used to say, "I think there's more, Bud." I had that near-death experience, and
Yeah.
I said, "I think there's more," And so in the dream, I say to him, is it like I told you I thought it'd be?" And I was so happy to see him. He never answered me, didn't speak to me, but he smiled, and he kind of gave his head that little bobble that he'd do every once in a while. He just smiled real big, and then poop, I was awake. But I had the only message I think that he said to me was, "I'm proud of you, kid." And the weird part of it is, I had just finished Extraordinary Contact. I had just finished it. And but I also felt like that wasn't just meant for me. And Leslie Keene came into my mind immediately when I woke up. And I thought, I have to tell her about this dream, because this is meant for her too.
Yeah.
And so I sent her a message. Little did I know what she was up to at the time I sent her that message. But apparently there was some really awesome stuff going down with her book that she had written.
On life after death. Yeah.
Yes. There was something was going to happen, like some TV thing. Well, I didn't know anything about it, but apparently this was right about this time. And I said, and so I sent her this message, and I said, this message was not just meant for me. He wanted me to tell you that he's proud of you. And she wrote me back and she said, oh my God, that's so wonderful. Thank you for sharing that with me. Because it was so intensely, the drive to contact her was so strong that I couldn't not, and I've come to realize in my life that when I feel like that, I better act on it.
Yeah.
Wow.
So you do some art, and a lot of this just came to you. You have like these noetic things. So we had the crop circles back in the 1990s, and you can see my screen, correct?
Yeah.
From yours. Okay. So here's the crop circle from 1990, and here's your drawing. Can you maybe comment on that?
Well, I got all these visions, I called them, these drawings, shapes, and little verbiages, little, sentences, what came to me over a course of a couple of years, more intensely for several months. That I would have to keep a notebook next to my bed at night because it would wake me up out of a sound sleep. And if I didn't draw what I saw or write down what I'd heard, it wouldn't leave me alone until I did. And I could even be driving down the street, and if a thought, a phrase or something, sentence come in my mind, I couldn't focus on driving until I pulled over and wrote it down. Once I put it down where it wouldn't be lost, then I was free to go, but it wouldn't leave me alone until then. And this drawing here, I called it transformation from dark to light. And I know that the crop circle showed up, let's see, that might have been early 90s, and the crop circle showed up after I did the drawings. But I know a lot of people believe that all crop circles are done by humans. And even if that's true, something had to put that design into that human's mind to put it down on the ground.
I think that's actually what Colin Andrews said, that when he talked to the hoaxers, they said, I was sitting in the living room one day and this idea came into my head and I had to go put it down. And, and so that's what you're basically saying, is that they seemed to, they were making the crop circles, and then they're making the crop circles that were hoaxed as well.
And I even got like excited, a couple of them that I saw, I felt like they were really important and they meant something really important, but I didn't know what it was. But I just knew that I literally had a physical reaction to them, like the hair on my arms would stand up and my heart would start to pound, and I felt real excited, like, yes, but I didn't know why.
Is this the kind of stuff that Bud was holding back for control purposes?
Yeah.
Okay, here's a crop circle, and here's your drawing of it. And so explain this one here between these.
That one, that one was, when I drew that, whoever put that in my mind said, that's you. That's your people. That's you.
Okay.
I don't know what that means, but.
Interesting. Okay. This one here and yours here.
Yeah. And I don't know what that meant. I saw that on the wall of a place where I was, and I don't know how I got there, and I don't know how I got home, but I know the walls were black and shiny like marble. And this was like carved into it, and then, painted white in the carving.
Wow. And then this one, the triangle and the pyramid.
I was so obsessed with pyramids and triangles during that part of my life. For real. And I even drew a picture. I spent the night out in the back of a pickup truck in the middle of a bean field down in southern Indiana with a bunch of people watching the sky. This was in the 80s. And I had this vision in my head of the moon with like a dozen black triangles flying either to it or from it. I was never able, I was never able to discern which direction these triangle crafts were coming from that I drew, but there was a bunch of them, and they were coming from the moon to here, or they were going from here to the moon. I don't know, but
Wow.
that's another thing I saw in my head that I drew, but more triangles.
Yeah, I just did a book on triangles, and we go through the people who have the triangles on their wrists. You had the scoop mark, which I'm not sure they're doing the scoop mark. They seem to be doing the triangle now. They put triangles on people's wrists.
I
And I
had
always say,
that.
well, you had the triangle on the wrist too?
I did. Yep. It looked like somebody just scooped the top layer of my skin off on my wrist.
And
And
so,
there's
so
a
then I
picture of
always
it
say, like,
somewhere.
so what is this about? Like, what is this, a pre-abduction maneuver or whatever? It's like symbols. The triangle seems to be a very important symbol. A lot of people will talk about this, and I think you've got one more drawing coming up with triangles as well. I'm glad to see you had the triangle as well. And we had quite a few people come forward with the triangles of various types, but it's usually, on the wrist, whereas in the old days it was the scoop mark thing.
Yeah.
And you had that as well, right? And your mother had
Yep.
that?
My mom did. My mom, I always thought mine was, a birthmark that I inherited from my mom, because it was exactly identical to hers in the same place.
Wow. So you have this drop circle, and then this one here, which is the writing. Did you get the writing? Bud was keeping writing, right?
Yeah, he did keep it. I never got full on like pages and pages of writing like some people did. I just got bits and pieces that I drew down. This was counting, and this was some kind of counting. And this was more like timekeeping of some sort. And look at that. Does that not look like the symbol for Wi-Fi?
Yeah, exactly.
But I did that, back in the 80s.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And then this one here.
And the drawing I did that I call Casey's Bubbles.
Oh, yeah.
That these are universes.
Yeah.
Okay. I call it my Roy moment from Close Encounters of the Third Kind, when my son was, my kids loved bubbles, and you could get them for a dime.
Yeah.
And he had one of those big things, big wand with a whole bunch of holes in it, where you go like this, and there was just big wad of bubbles. And he was playing with that, and I saw this big wad of bubbles, and I had this Roy moment. And I thought, that's what they were telling me about. Those are universes. And all those little dark places where they touched a little bit, you can pass through those. Okay. Communication can happen through those. Travel can happen through those, but they move, and they're very fleeting. They don't last long. Just like soap bubbles, they slide around. And those little parts where they're one for a minute, for a second, So, but that was another example of the way my brain was trying to process this stuff in it.
Or the way they're putting stuff through your brain to bring it out, which leads to the question you mentioned that Bob Bigelow got your file from John Carpenter, had sold files to Bigelow, and your file was one of them. So now you see this whole thing about the ATIP and the OSAP, and the Congress is involved, and we're investigating UFOs. So let me ask you the question that I've asked a number of experiences. Did they actually come to you and ask you what's going on?
No, but you know what? I wouldn't mind if they did. I've always said, there's no reason to be slippery with me. I didn't ask for this. And, I'm sure those people are smarter than me and know more than I do. I would have always been willing to answer questions. And
that's the point. That's where I'm wondering what they're actually up to, because they didn't talk to you, and I think you have probably as many answers as anybody. And Chris Bledsoe, I talked to Chris Bledsoe. He's got like 30,000 photos and videos. He's been filming over and over again. He's like high-level government people. I said, did these people come to you and ask for your photographs? No. And so then you wonder, like, what are they really doing? They say they're investigating, but they're not talking to any of the major people. And then you wonder, like, what?
I got about 15 chunks of dirt that I dug from the center of the hole.
Yeah, exactly.
Where the mark was, that snow melted off for the first year. I still have them. They survived the tornado in my mom's cedar chest in some plastic bags.
Yeah.
And I dug them out and I've got them hidden here in the house. But if somebody, I realize they're 39 years old,
Yeah.
but they do look kind of weird. They look rocky like, but I
Well,
mean, I'd be more than happy to give somebody some if they want
well,
to examine it.
that's where I think we're still in the boat where I think it's the civilian people who are going to find the answer to this thing. I don't think the government's really digging. They want to build weapons, or they want to do whatever they want to do with whatever they've got, and that's why they're not talking to the major experiencers who they should be talking to, which means they must be doing something else. So tell the story about the dirt. I mean, the very weird story that you had the dirt and that was in the circle, and the experiment you did with it to show people how weird this dirt was.
But first, let me say, I do not believe disclosure is going to come from any government on earth.
Right.
I believe the disclosure is going to come from people like me
Right
and
on.
them.
Right
The ones that
Yeah.
be disclosed. They're going to be the ones that determine when this is coming. And I'm just telling you, I feel like it's coming real soon, and ain't no government on the planet going to stop it.
Yeah, right on.
But anyway, the dirt, let me say, it smelled weird. I don't know what smell. It smelled weird, like, I don't know, rotten eggs or weird. And it was rock hard. I was 100 pounds heavier than I am now. And I was out there with my dad's spade trying to dig up some samples to send to Bud. And I was literally jumping on this spade, and I was just barely chunking up pieces of this. And there was a crack on one side, and I wanted to see how deep the crack was. It was almost like the dirt kind of pushed up on one side and cracked down deep. And I got one of those 12-inch rulers from the school, ruler, like 12-inch. And I tried to stick it down in there, and I dropped it and it disappeared. So I've never found it. So I have no idea how deep that crack went. But I managed to chunk up some of this stuff, and I put a bunch of it away. I don't know why. Something just said, you better hang on to some of this, Missy. And I put an experiment. I put a piece of this dirt in a glass of water, and I put a piece of dirt that I dug up from another part of the yard in water, which when I put the dirt in the other part of the yard in water, it was mud, in an hour. But I left the dirt clump from the mark in the yard in the water for 24 hours overnight, and it was still just a clump of dirt when I got up the next day. The water had absolutely no effect on it whatsoever. None. And I don't know, Bud did take some samples. He had some laboratory do some stuff with it, and they found a couple odd things with it. With the dirt, like they had to bake it at some ridiculous temperature for a ridiculous amount of time to even get it to be remotely dry. But I don't think they could still get it to be as moisture repellent as it was. And I don't think there was any kind of microbiological life in the soil or something like that. It's in Intruders, the report about what happened to the soil. So you probably know more than I do, because I don't remember all of it.
I always call that the stuff like the theory of wow, where they do these really, really weird things. They just keep you thinking. It's like, I asked Jacques Vallée about the pieces that fall out of the sky. And I said, Jacques, this doesn't make any sense. You come across the galaxy and you avoid galaxies and black holes, and you get here, and then pieces start falling off the flying saucer. I mean, it looks like it's, and then I said, it looks like they're dropping the stuff as gifts to try to get people to think and to do investigations and realize we're not alone and that something weird is going on. And that's when he said, well, I think I kind of came up with the idea of the gifting. This is what they're doing. They're using you and people like me and stuff to get the message out that the government side, as you said, is not going to come from the government. It's going to come from people like you. And so I'm going to keep pushing to try to get people to listen to people like you who actually are in getting the messages and have the material that can get us to at least to the idea that the world is not the way you think it is. It's a little bit different.
What I feel like I see a teeny tiny sliver of what's going on around me. And every now and then I can get a glimpse of something else. And I almost feel like I have like some extra wiring in my brain that I can glimpse this other stuff that I wish I had more control of it so I could strengthen and focus it and see it, because one time I thought I saw my late husband. I wasn't feeling good and I was laying down and I had my eyes closed, and I opened my eyes and I looked up at the ceiling. Was just a white ceiling. No one was in the room with me. And all of a sudden I saw this face like push through the space between the white ceiling and me. And have you ever seen one of those toys that's full of pins and you put your hand on it and it pushes the impression of the hand out the backside?
Yeah.
That's what this did. But it was clear. I could see the ceiling and everything, but I could also now see his face. I could see the details. And I mean, not color, but I knew the shape of my husband's face, the nose, the mouth, the lips, the face, the eyes. It pushed through some kind of thin veil between us, and it looked concerned. And I wasn't afraid. And I looked up at it and I said, I'm okay. You can go back. And when I said that, it retreated and it went away. But it was the weirdest thing I'd ever seen. I wasn't afraid because I recognized him, but it was like he was standing in the room with me, but we were separated by this thin skin that I couldn't see through, but he could. I mean, it's just the weirdest thing. I know it sounds crazy.
Do you think the intelligence has this as part of the message about life after death? I think the free survey showed that 25% of people claimed that they had been told reincarnation was a part of it, that or Chris Bledsoe, when they asked him, when did you first see them? Well, they've been with me since before I was born. Was that another lifetime? Yes. This idea that this is part of the message that and 37% of all near-death people, experiencers, I always said, tell me this is coincidence. You have all these experiencers, and then 37% of those have a near-death experience, which is like 8 times the national average, 37%. The average is 5%, and you had a near-death experience. Can you tell us about that as well?
It was when my oldest son was born. He wasn't due for almost 7 weeks, and I developed eclampsia, and I went into heart failure, liver failure, kidney failure. I was semi-comatose. I was taken in for an emergency C-section. I had less than 50% chance of survival. The baby actually had more of a chance of survival than I did, and this was 43 years ago, almost. So I remember, I remember them cutting me open. I couldn't move. I was paralyzed, but I could feel every single thing they did. It was a burning pinch and pull. And I wanted to scream at the top of my lungs and tell them I could feel it, but I could not. And I heard the doctors talking about sailboats at Geist Reservoir. I heard somebody in the operating room talking about sailboats at Geist Reservoir. And then their voices started to fade. Their voices started going farther and farther away. And all of a sudden I felt myself disconnect from my body. It was a literal feeling of, and I was suddenly in a black box, and it was black. I could not see my hands, but I knew they were there. I could feel them. And I started to pound on this box, and I was screaming at the top of my lungs, let me out. I am not dead. Let me out of this thing. And the voices were farther and farther away. And it almost sounded like they were in another room once I disconnected, and their voices were going farther and farther away. And then I heard a woman's voice blast through my being into the box. And I think in retrospect, it must have been a nurse. My rational self tells me it was a nurse.
Yeah.
And she said, you can't leave yet. You just had a baby and he needs his mother.
Yeah.
And when she said, you just had a baby, I was like, oh, I just had a baby. I had completely forgotten that I had just had a baby. I'd completely forgotten about the entire life I was trying to get away from. I'd completely forgotten about all of it. I just wanted to get out of this box and go. And when she said that, I'm like, I ain't going anywhere. Boom. And I I locked back in. And as soon as I connected back into my body, the sounds came rushing back. And I heard all this, the yelling and all the banging around and the noise and people hollering back and forth things. And all I could think about was my baby, my baby, my baby, you know? And then all of a sudden, it felt like I was getting air that I hadn't been breathing. And then I was breathing, air was filling in my lungs, and it was so delicious. And I was gulping it in like water for somebody that just came out of the desert. I was just gulping down this air, and it was, oh, it felt so good. It just felt so good. And I was just gulping it down, and I began to be able to move, and I wiggled my legs. And I know I moved them because I felt a strap go down around them and tighten back up. And they had to paddle me twice to get me started. And I don't recall the electrical part unless it was the whoop. But yeah, once that was over with, you know, I told my doctor, I said, I heard you talking about sailboats. And he's like, he didn't say anything. And I said, I also felt you cut me open. And then he looked at me kind of weird. And I told him how it felt. I said, it's not like the theater movies when they just slice you. I said, it was a pinch and a pull, and it burnt like fire. And I wanted to scream. And then he was looking at me like, oh, damn, you know, and then, but he never did confirm or deny anybody was talking about sailboats. But my blood pressure was still way high. It was like in the 250s. And wow. I said, my baby, I came back for my baby, and my baby's dead. Nobody's telling me because you're afraid I'll leave if you don't, you know. And he's like, your baby is fine. He goes, as a matter of fact, I can't believe how fine your baby is. He was at least 6 weeks premature, but his lungs were fully developed. Yeah. He did not have any body fat. He didn't have any fingernails or toenails. He had long white hair all over him, and his eyes were sealed shut, and his ears were curled like Dr. Spock ears. And they were taking my blood pressure every 5 minutes, and the doctor came in again, and he goes, what is it going to take to calm you down? I said, my baby. He said, put her ass on a stretcher and take her down there right now. So they did. They took me out of ICU, and they rode me to the NICU, rolled me up along the incubator where my baby was screaming bloody murder. And I reached in and put my hand in there, and I held his foot, and I said, Mama's here. And he shut right up. And the nurse standing next to him said, look at that. All he wanted was his mom. He just wanted to make sure you was here. You know, we both went home together 7 days later.
Fascinating story.
That I didn't have your typical near-death experience. I didn't see Jesus. I didn't see a bunch of dead people that I knew. I didn't see a white light, but I knew that I disconnected from my body, and I would have gotten out if it hadn't been for my baby.
Yeah. It's almost like it's just another one of the messages, almost like with the UFO stuff, is like to look at people and say, you think what's happening around you is real. You're missing the point. There's a lot more going on than what people think is going on. And
just like I say, the brain is a tube type radio in a Dolby digital surround sound world. Because I'm sitting right here in this room right now, and I got television signals, Wi-Fi. I got like 10 Wi-Fi signals probably going through me right now. But my brain isn't wired to receive it, so I can't perceive it.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I am here to say there's something different about me. And the older I get, the more pronounced it gets. Like I said, I don't know if I was born this way. I don't know if the early physical contact facilitated this, but I feel like I have extra wiring or something, like I said, that I can perceive maybe a little bit more. Maybe that's why Mom and I saw that boomerang shaped craft, but nobody else around us did. Yeah. Because we're wired to receive this stuff. And then I had, I've had MRAs, and CTAs of my brain and neck because I have FMD, which is a genetic disorder in the vascular system. Yeah. And so they check for that. And my ocular neurologist and my regular neurologist have both told me I have a bright spot in the center of my brain. And now I've developed a bright spot in my visual cortex of my brain. but they're not dangerous and they're not anything to worry about. And I asked the visual or the optical neurologist what it was. And she said, they believe that it's probably scar tissue from migraines. And I said, well, I don't have migraines. Well, I did start having ocular migraines a couple of years ago, but this was before this was after they already said that. And I have these ocular migraines, and I've only had like 4, but I see these triangular prisms of light that spin like a kaleidoscope in the left eye in the lower vision.
Yeah.
Starts
Wow.
with flashing. Then I see this arc of triangles that twirl, and they're beautiful, beautiful colors. And then I'm blind in that eye for about 20 minutes.
Wow.
But it's not in my eyeball, it's in my brain.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Have you had any pre-birth remembrances or stuff like that?
I remember I was just like hanging in darkness, looking at this beautiful sun. And I remember this when I was a little kid, like I was just hanging in darkness, looking at this beautiful bright sun, or what looked like a sun to me. And all of a sudden the sun exploded in a infinite number of shards of this glistening golden light. And they just shot out everywhere. And somebody said to me in that moment, that's you.
Beautiful.
Then all of those shards, it was my understanding that each one of those shards was a soul that went somewhere and existed. And then when it was finished, it came back to the sun, and it brought back with them, with it, everything that it had experienced when it went to this life. And then it would go somewhere else if it wanted to. But there was always a bunch there that didn't go anymore. It was always like the sun. So it would explode and then would come back, and it would explode and come back. And I was a little kid when I had this dream.
Wow. And that's pretty, I think, pretty much accurate according to, some of the later thinking as to how this reality may actually work. You had another dream about being in a facility where you were being sent out. You're in a big facility.
All my life, I used to hang up, picture an 8-year-old girl hanging upside down on her swing set with her Chuck Taylors swinging in the wind and her hair dragging the ground. And I'm looking up at the stars at night, and I'm thinking to myself, there's somebody up there that misses me and I miss them. And thinking, I know there's somebody up there looking at my star, at my light, and wondering if I'm here. And I'm here. And I'm thinking of all the things that I can do in this world, and I'm thinking, is that it? Is that all there is here? And I had a dream one time where I was in this giant, it was like a multiple football field size hangar or something.
Yeah.
Kind of like Star Wars stuff, where it was like a place where there was all different kinds of life, all different kinds of creatures walking around, and it was so cool. And I wasn't scared, and it just felt comfortable. And I remember getting on this craft, boarding this craft, and with other people, and this old man whom I absolutely loved with everything that I am. He was saying, wishing us goodbye. And I was sad. I didn't want to leave him. And I'm like, I'm never going to forget you. And he's like, yeah, you will. I'm like, no, I won't. And I remember, getting in this thing and going away. And then all my life as a kid growing up, I always felt like I didn't belong here. Like, I love my mom and dad. I look like my mom and dad, my siblings and all that, but somehow I just never felt like I fit,
There's some leakage back. The dream that one of the most impressive parts of your story is your repetitive dream. I think you've had it 5 times.
Ooh.
I think it's very meaningful. Can you go through that dream?
It's a 3-part dream that I've had from the time I was very young. And when I have one of these, when I have the first dream, I know that the next 2 nights I'm going to have the next two, part of the dream. It's like a mini series of dreams over a period of a couple days. It's always the same. It starts out, I'm somewhere, I'm on Earth, I'm somewhere around here, and it's bad. The weather is horrible. The wind is blowing. The rain stings my face. The sky is a weird color. I'm literally digging my fingers in the mud to hold on, and I'm trying to get somewhere. At one point, I'm in a ditch and I'm looking across this open field, and I see this hill, and I'm thinking, I got to get to that hill. If I just get to that hill, I'll be all right. And the sky is weird colors, and I see like red and green streaks in the sky. And so I'm clawing my way across this field on my belly. Like I said, the wind is blowing in my face. The rain is smashing me, like stinging me in the face. Mm-hmm. So I get to the base of this hill, and I look up, and there is a dude standing on the top of this hill, and it's not a great big hill. I don't know. It reminded me of a lot of the mound at Cahokia, about that size, and this guy standing on top of this hill. This weather is having absolutely no effect on him whatsoever. He's clean, he's dry, his hair is not blowing around in the wind. There's a strange light around him, a soft light. He's got all dressed in white, and he leans down and says, "It's time to go home." Mm-hmm. And he reaches his hand out. I take his hand and I wake up.
Almost sounds like your life. Like you get put in here. It's going to be a very tough life. You go across, and you have the water, the rain, which you've maybe you can elaborate on that. You've had a couple, because there's got to be maybe 5 or 6 people. There's going to be thousands of people who listen to this, but there's got to be 5 or 6 people who need a roof. So can you talk about how to manifest a roof?
All right. I know how crazy it sounds. I really do. And I hesitated to say anything to anybody. And I kind of told my husband about it in jest. And after I told a couple other people, I'm like, that is really kind of interesting. We moved from this big old farmhouse, and we did not have, it was a big job, and it cost a lot more money than I thought it was going to cost to move and get everything moved over. And the house we got was a great price, but we also knew it was going to need a new roof, and it was going to need new air conditioner and furnace before, it was all said and done. But there was no leaks. The roof looked pretty good and everything. But we're looking at a lot of money here, and we thought we were going to be able to have the time to do it. And then my insurance company pulled a nasty on me and threatened, if you don't replace that roof within a year, we're not going to insure the house. And I'm like, you can't do that. And there was nothing wrong with the roof. It did not look bad. I have lived in way worse. So so that put an extra stress on me, and I'm a worrier about that sort. I'm not so much anymore, but I was a worrier about that. And I had gotten this book, called E Squared, I think, by Pam Grout. I can't remember the name exactly, but it was about manifesting things. And I don't know, but some of the thoughts that had popped in my head over the years kind of led me to believe that I was capable of that. And so was everybody, actually, once you figure it out. But I thought, okay, I'm going to try this. She wrote a good book. She's a excellent writer. It made sense. I did a couple of the small exercises in the earlier chapters, and it worked. I mean, I would do this exercise, and the next day I'd get like a $20 check in the mail from some overpayment on insurance I had no idea that I'd done, and it was like, what the hell? So, and it wasn't just about money. You could manifest all kinds of stuff, and I guess it's just out there, and you just reach out and grab it and pull it to you, and you live it like it's already happened, and you think it as if it's already in existence. And my mom used to say, if you can think it, it exists somewhere. Mind over matter. Mom always used to pound that into us. And so anyway, I had reached a point where it was going to be bigger. The exercise was going to get more bigger, because I think there were like 9 in this book that you progressively got asked for more and more. Yeah. And I was stressing out real bad, having a hard time sleeping, laying in bed. And I thought about that book, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to try it right now. And I got the book out, reread it to make sure I knew what I was going to do, what I was going to do. I lit my incense and put my, tones on so I could get my brain in the right, meditate a little bit and calm myself down and really feel that power inside of me and say, I want you to bring this to me, and I want you to bring it to me, right away. You have to, as I learned, you need to be real specific. I'm like, I need a new roof, a new air conditioner, and a new furnace, and I need them right now. So I did this, and for a flicker of a moment, it felt like I had them. And I thought, yeah, that's cool. And so I went to bed, and I was actually able to fall asleep because I kind of felt good after I, calmed down. Within 36 hours, my house was hit by a tornado. I was in the closet when it hit. And there was nothing left of this house but the outer walls and the closet I was in. Of course, there was a bunch of crap on top of me. I had to be dug out, but I didn't have a scratch on me. And by God, my insurance company, we were catastrophic loss number 25 that year. And so everything went straight to the top. And I got a new roof, a new air conditioner, and a new furnace, and a new everything. And so I thought, how does this even happen? And I told my husband, I said, you know what I did, like the night before the tornado? And he's like, what? And I told him, he goes, why the hell did you do that? And he said, next time, why don't you try being a little more specific about the delivery method? And after I read some more of her book, it's like, yeah, you got to be, the universe doesn't know the difference between, a lottery ticket or a tornado, whatever. The shortest between 2 points is where it's going to go. I got everything I asked for, and I got it real quick.
That's when I heard you talk about the dream, I'm thinking like, that is so true of your life. Like the struggle, you've had a tough life. If people read your book and read your story, you haven't had an easy go of it through your life. And I think that's probably what's going to happen when you're finished. They're going to say, Deb, good job. Time to go home. And
you know what I told somebody one time, I go, what the hell is it with me and all this crap that I have between the paranormal stuff, the UFO, quote unquote, whatever that is stuff, yeah, and just life. I've lived through things that most people never even experience. And then I thought, who did I piss off to get all this at once? And then I thought, you know what, knowing me, I probably went into some business meeting somewhere and said, yeah, I'll do this, that, hell with it. Let's just get it all over with at once, and I won't have to come back. And my mother told me one time when I was a little kid that she said, you used to tell me that you were going to do this, you were going to get married, and you were going to have kids, and you were going to get divorced. And I go, what kid says they're going to get divorced? And she said, you told me that you were going to live in a big white farmhouse with a green roof and a porch swing. And this was when I was, kindergarten. Yeah. And she was telling me this. We were sitting on my porch swing in my big white farmhouse with the green roof. Wow. And she goes, I don't know what it is about you of all 4 of my kids, but you're the only kid that I know that I have that can fall into a bucket of shit and come out smelling like a rose every time. And I'm like, I don't know. My own mother told me that. Well, my mom she was special. She was a different kind of person.
Wow. But it's a good lesson that people can see that no matter how bad it gets, that there's by looking at the way you've handled it and how it's worked, that in the end, it'll all work out.
Well, that's what I said earlier. Everything is a choice. And I may not always get to choose exactly what happens to me, but I can always choose how I'm going to respond to it, how I'm going to use. I chose, like, I watched my husband commit suicide. I watched him shoot himself in our backyard with a 12 gauge. That's not a pretty thing to see.
Yeah.
All the sheriffs in Howard County were with me when we did it. Some people could never recover from that.
Yeah.
I did. Not only did I recover from it, but I became stronger for it. And now 28 years later, I can say that the fact that I was out there and I saw that was a blessing to me, because it showed me how strong I can be, and I am. And I visualize myself as this little ball in a slingshot.
Yeah.
And whoever it is that's holding the slingshot, and they pull me down, and the farther down they pull me, the farther up I go when they let
Wow.
go.
You're a
You
wonderful,
know?
you're a wonderful example.
And I just feel like, like I said, it would be very easy for me to live my life bitter and angry and
Yeah.
paranoid and sad. It's very easy for somebody in my shoes and with my experiences to attribute anything negative or weird to the phenomenon. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that was a rabbit hole I never wanted to go down, because, my kids kept me grounded, and I wanted to be a stable parent and give them a good life. And, so I never allowed myself to go there. I always tried to find the prosaic answer for everything. And I always tried to find the silver lining to every cloud. I always tried to find the lesson in every experience. And I believe that the universe speaks to me, and you listen more than just with your ears or your eyes. It tells you. I've learned to trust my instinct. It never steers me wrong.
Wow. Wonderful words.
It-
Let's
yeah.
finish these drawings, because there's one I want to show you. We actually put it in the triangle book, but I want to finish this because I still want to do a little bit on apports, and we want to do your EVP things. And I got two important questions yet to go through, but let's go through these last drawings here that are on your website that people should check out your website. You've got a lot of stuff. You journal on the website, and you're retired now, so you're putting a lot of this stuff up, correct?
Yeah. Well, my husband's my webmaster, but
there you go. So this is the crop circle, and this is what you drew. Again, we're into the triangle thing.
Yeah. And that thing that I drew, actually, I felt like I saw it somewhere, I guess on a ship or wherever I was. I wasn't at home. I'll just say that. Where I was, I'm not sure. And at first I thought it was alive because it was moving, and I thought it was some kind of weird animal, because it was like rotating and moving in a strange way, like in a 3D way. And it was like nothing I'd ever seen before. And so that's why I drew that.
Wow. This one here.
That's my Wi-Fi signal again.
There you go. That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Here's your triangle one you were talking about before, I think, with the triangles.
All those black triangles in the moon.
And this came to you sort of in a moment of inspiration, or in a dream, or how did this come?
No, I was laying in the back of a pickup truck in the middle of a bean field with a bunch of people, and we were sky watching. And I was a MUFON investigator at that time, and there'd been a bunch of reports of black triangles down in that area in Lucky Point, Indiana. So we were down there to investigate, and we just spent the night out in the bean field in the backs of our trucks, looking at the sky, and the moon was bright, and I just had that vision. While I was looking, so I drew it.
Wow. This is the one that I want to talk about here. Okay, so this one here, we put in the triangle book with another one that is almost identical. And then I got a phone call from Race Hobbs. Do you know Race Hobbs from KGR? Yeah. Okay, so Race Hobbs told me, he said, "Where the hell did you get that drawing?" And I said, "Well, somebody gave it to me, and Deb had one." And he had a girl who was 16 years old, who was, I think she's 16. She's putting out an album. I'll send you all these. In fact, I'll even send you the triangle book, and you'll see the thing. And he said, she's asked us to put this on the cover. And I'm wondering, where did you get this drawing from? And it's exactly the same, except it's got the dots are in different places. And she wanted it on her album of a record. They were doing a record album for her, or a cover, and she insisted this had to be on the album. And I said, well, find out if she's an experiencer or something. Like, why is she insisting this? And I never did get an answer, but you have one. There's two almost identical to this. It's just the dots are in different places.
That was another, again, I was somewhere where there was the black wall that was like black shiny granite, and this was carved into it in an area, and I don't know what it means.
Wow. That just fascinates me, where you get these symbols, because triangle seems to be the big, or even the black triangles. Like, why do you need a black triangle ship that's like 2 miles across and never lands? None of them ever land. And then you start wondering, like, what is really going on here?
Mm-hmm.
So let's stop sharing. And I want to go through the apport thing quickly, because I'm doing a book on apports, and you've got some of the wildest apport stories. You already told me the one about Bud, that the day that Bud phoned you about your letter, the coffee table moves across. And the wedding rings. Tell me the story about the rings. You have two stories of rings.
Well, the one ring story was my boyfriend at the time, who was later my husband, and the wedding ring was with him too. But I was living with my mom and dad. We were in that house where all that happened, and where June 30, 83 happened. And I had set the ring down on the end table, and I went to bed, and I woke up the next morning and the ring was gone. And I searched the room for 3 days. I searched the whole house for this ring, and I couldn't find it. And I was heartbroken, and I didn't want to tell him I'd lost the ring. And so I was in the boys' bedroom, which was the room next to mine, running the sweeper one day, a couple of days later. And I thought, that ring is in here. I don't know why it would. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. So I stopped running the sweeper, and I looked under the beds. I looked under the both beds, felt all around with my hands. I didn't see a ring anywhere in that room. So I was running sweeper again, and I'm like, that ring is in here. It's here in this room. Eventually, I kind of pulled up the carpeting a little bit. Let me tell you what, pulling carpeting up off a tack strip is not as easy as you think. But I pulled it off the edge underneath Casey's bed, and I kind of feel up under there, and I still don't think. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? My ring's not in here. And something is saying, your ring is in here. And I'm like, okay. So I move the beds around, and I am ripping the carpeting up. And I'm getting into the padding, where they staple it to the wood floors, and I'm pulling those up. I'm like ripping and padding off the
And your
staple.
mother's watching this whole thing, right?
My mom walks in, and she's like, what in the hell are you doing? And I'm like, my ring's in here. My ring's in here. And she's standing there watching me tear up this room. And she's like, you're going to fix that. I'm like, I'll fix it. I'll fix it. I get this carpeting and padding pulled up and shoved up under this twin bed. There's 2 twin beds in this room, and I can't get it out of the way enough. I get like way up, almost in the middle of the room, up under this bed. And there, under the padding and the carpeting, is my ring. And I was so glad that my mother saw that, because if nobody had been there to see that happen, there is no way in hell that no one would have believed that. I didn't even believe it. And I'm like, how did the hell did this happen? And how did I know that it was here? And my mom's flipping out, And then later, I was married to the guy who gave me that ring. And all I remember is my ring was gone. I woke up, and there was grass in the bed all over the back of me, all over the backside of me. And he had mowed the orchard the night before. And I know there was grass all in the bed, and there was grass all over my backside and my hair and everything. My ring was gone. And I looked all over the place for my ring. And eventually it appeared on the bed was by the window, and the window I had like stones on it, crystal things, because I like that sort of thing. Yeah. And my ring ended up there. But the weird part about it was, after that, my husband said he thought it was a sign that my ring was gone, that he shouldn't be with me, that I shouldn't be with anybody, because he was inhibiting something that I had to do. And we ended up getting divorced. It had that big of an impact on him.
Wow.
And did you read a story about the bees that were in the boys' room that day?
No, I didn't hear. No, I didn't see that one. No.
I think it's in that book. If it's not in Extraordinary Contact, it's in the other one, Abducted. Is the kids were screaming and bloody murder one morning. We got up, and the whole bedroom where they were at was full of bees. I mean,
wow,
hundreds, maybe thousands of bees. and they were lethargic. They were acting weird, but they were like hanging off the light fixtures. They were hanging off the curtains. Their floor was covered with them. The beds were covered with them, but they didn't sting anybody, or they weren't stinging it. They were like lethargic, like they were zoned out or something.
Yeah.
And we could never figure out how those bees got in that bedroom, because Daddy had painted the windows shut on accident, a while back. And there was no like attic door in their closet, there was no attic in that room. So there was no way that the bee, and this was a sandstone house. It wasn't like a clapboard house. This was a stone house. So we could never figure out how those bees got in that room.
Wow. The story of the plants and the rocks, your collection of plants and rocks.
Oh, it was after June 30, 83. And I had this obsession with seeds. And everywhere I went, I'd pick up a seed or a rock. I had pickup stones, and I joked at one time my bedroom probably looked like a botanist's laboratory, because I just had so much crap everywhere. I remember pulling over the side of the road to snag some cattails and bring them home. And then one morning I woke up and all my stuff was gone, and I thought my mom had gotten rid of it, because she'd been bitching about it, and like, what are you going to do with all this stuff? It's nasty. And I woke up one morning and it was all gone. And I'm like, Mom, did you take all my stuff? And she said she didn't. She couldn't figure out where it was at either. So I took a spell after that June 30, 83 incident, where I would, like, when I would look at something, I would like take it apart with my brain.
Yeah.
Literally. I mean, I tore apart radios just to see how they went apart, and then tried to put them back together. And at the end, some of that stuck with me. When I worked for the automotive manufacturer, that's part supplier for them.
Yeah.
I ended up being I repaired circuit boards.
Okay.
But I had a high school diploma and a beauty school certificate. And I taught myself schematics, and my quality guy called me the gatekeeper, because I would catch errors come off of in-circuit testing from the assembly, from the line, where the Siemens machine, the fast component things would put down. I'd catch errors.
Yeah.
Then I had engineers used to bring me their garage door openers and key fobs and ask me to fix them. And I'm like, you make a whole lot more money than me. You got $5? And they're like, yeah. They whip out $5 and I fix their garage door opener for them for $5 at my workbench. But I used to tease my quality guy. I said, I have a high school diploma and a beauty school certificate. And he's like, don't tell anybody.
But it's almost like you said, like you're wired different. It's almost like you come in with these talents. And it's like, it reminds me of this. I'll read you this expression you got from this one message. Hey, Deb, from this side, you look like a bright bubble of light just floating through your daily life out there in our darkness. You are brighter than most. So it's this idea that you have these, just you're able to tap in, you're able to pick up more, you're more sensitive, that sort of thing, where everybody may not have the talent. And that's why I say it's so important to talk to people like you, that there are people, almost like you can get these people who are savants. Like, there's this one guy in New York City where they ask him, what's 2 times 3? And he goes, I don't know, 6. Would that be 7? And then he says, what's 5 times 7? Would that be 50? And then they say, with April 11th in the year 1, what day would that be? He goes, oh, that's a Tuesday. And you'd be right 100% of the time. It's sort of like you're in the field, you're picking it up, and it's like you're brighter than most in terms of you're just more sensitive, that you've tapped into this thing. And that's why I think it's so important for people to listen to you, and even with the apports, because most people on this show would know that reports happen around people who are experiencers. It happens around ghost experiences and stuff like that. But around you, it happens like it's like times 10. You got all sorts of stuff. So tell me the story about the one that the most impressive, where again we get this message about there's more to the world than the physical world. The message they're trying to get across is that there's this other aspect and there's life after death. Tell me the story about your mother sends you a message.
Well, when my mom died, my mom had lung cancer, and we knew it was coming. Everybody knew it was coming. It was close. And I was going down there at that point. She was in the hospital. And when I visited her the day before, and I just knew it wouldn't be long. And so I went back the next day and I spent the night there. And I spent the night with Mom, and probably about 11 or 12 o'clock at night, I hear my dad walking down the hall with my brother. And I'm like, old man, what are you doing here? And he goes, your mom was calling me. And I said, no, she wasn't. I've been sitting here with her all night and she hasn't picked up the phone. He goes, did I say she used the phone? I said, no, okay, I got you. So anyway, so then Daddy ended up being there. And then the next morning, my older sister, Kathy, showed up, and Mom passed away at 11:15 in the morning. So we were there, and it was a long day. This was down in Indy, and I live up 50 miles north in Kokomo. And so after Mom passed away and I called my other brother and sister, we went across town to Daddy's house. The family just gathered, and I headed back to Kokomo late that night. It was the dark and I was exhausted, and it was a long, sad drive, and I was crying the whole way home. And I got home and I was just worn out, and my husband and I went to bed. And I suppose it was around 1:30 or so in the morning. I can't remember exactly, but we were both woke up by this crashing sound our bedroom was upstairs, and it was in the landing area, upstairs and down the stairwell. And I'm like, what the hell? And we're both just literally fell out of bed, ran out to see what was going on. And I looked down the bottom of the stairs, and there was a picture of my mom at the bottom of the stairs, sitting straight up. And I'm like, oh my God, that's Mom. And my husband's like, yeah, I know. And I'm like, look, he went down and got the photo frame, and it was just one of those cheap ones with the cardboard in the back. So I expected to see the cardboard ripped, like it was just broke. Well, it wasn't. The cardboard was intact, and the nail was still in the wall solidly, because it was old plaster walls. And I'm like, okay. And then it dawned on me, that's Mom, because Mom and I talked about death before she died. And she was raised in a Pentecostal church, as a child. And she's like, what if we, just die and we're nothing? And I go, Mom, that's not true. And she goes, yeah, no, but what if we, and I said, well, if it is true, then what do you care? You're not going to know. So whoop, big deal. No, what's the big deal? So I always said to her, if you can, will you show me that I'm right, that there's something else? And she goes, yeah. She said she would. We talked about it. So I got all excited. I'm like, that's Mom. She said she would. And she did. And I was, my sadness went away. I did, the heaviness left me. My heart felt light. I was excited. And we ran downstairs, and I sat on the couch while my husband went to the back kitchen to get something to drink. And my little dog was at my foot. And I had these two little angel figurines that like sit on the edge of things. And I had them on the edge of the stairs that go up the first little set of steps before the landing where Mom's picture was. And then it turned to the longer steps. Yeah. But one of the angels, my dog was like shaking and panting, and I was like, what's wrong, Cookie? And just as I looked down at her, the bottom angel literally leapt off of the steps and rolled across the floor and stopped at my foot. And I'm like, it is Mom. It is Mom. Mom, I was just so excited, And so I told my brother and sister about it the next day. And they're like, well, she didn't come to me. And I'm like, did you ask her? Well, no. I said, and if she had, would it have scared the crap out of you and you had a heart attack? Probably. And I'm like, well, then there's your answer. I said, I asked her to. And when she did it, I was elated. I wasn't scared. I was thrilled that she was there. I knew it. I knew that was her. And then when my husband died, I told you I watched him commit suicide. Several things happened within days after his dying that not only affected me, but other people around us had signs, even so far down to Florida. The woman called me like the day after he passed away, and she's like, I don't know why, but I thought like Kale was in my room playing with my dogs out in my utility room, and I could almost hear him saying, be sure and tell her how much I love her, because how much I loved her. And I said, oh my God, Vicki, he passed away yesterday, and I just have not called you yet.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm telling you, yeah, that I've been so blessed with things like that. My brother and sister still were mad at me because she didn't come to them. And I said, you didn't ask her. And she was your mother. She wouldn't have done anything to scare you. She knew you'd have a flipping stroke if something like that happened, But anyway, yeah.
A couple quick questions, and then we'll end with the EVPs. Maybe we can, I'm planning to do an EVP panel, because a lot of experiencers get into EVPs and paranormal stuff. So I was thinking maybe you could join us for a panel sometime to talk about
that'd
EVPs.
be fun.
But I wanted to ask a couple of things. The one I look at a lot of these aspects as to what's really going on, and there's these different patterns. And the one pattern that you, I think, sort of supported was the fact that a lot of experiencers deal with a lot of different aliens, but there's one that they actually deal with that explains things to them, that comforts them. Was that the case with you, that you had one particular being that sort of communicated with you?
Well, there was, in every contact that I recalled, it was always the same guy. I felt like it was. I mean, you couldn't tell the difference by looking at him, but for some reason he felt differently, and he felt familiar, in several of those things. And I remember the gray guys, as I call them, and then human looking people. And there were a couple, like there was the one time when I called it the rubber band man, who was crazy looking with the teeth and all that. I don't even know what that was. And the old woman, I remember her looking at me. She kind of looked like a gray one, only kind of maybe more human a little, but she looked really old and sad. But mostly it's always the gray ones. And I've never had any experience with any mantis type or any reptilian type, and never. But so I can only speak for what I recall. But I believe there's gobs of different kinds of life out there, of all different kinds.
Yeah, but the idea that I was thinking is like, it's almost like you have the guy standing at the top of the hill, the guy that sends you on your way in the big building, and then you have this one person. It almost looks like a spirit guide thing, where you take a closer look. Who is this really? Because it's not actually going to be a being. It's going to be a ball of light, the same as you and I are a ball of light, and they're screen imaging as some sort of figure or whatever. Even, I don't know if you've seen the tape with Bud and Mac. They're in Boston, where John Mack says to me, says, Bud, it's kind of weird. He says, I'm the psychiatrist here, and he says, you think I'd be getting all the bad ones. He said, I'm getting all the spiritual seeking ones, and you're getting all the bad ones. And maybe that has more to do with you and I. This sort of idea that Mac had at the end of his life, that the being that you see, is screen imaging based upon your fear or your state of affairs or whatever, and this idea that Bud was getting all one type and Mac was getting another type, and it may maybe something completely different than what we think is going on.
And then funny that I turned out to be the Mac type, even though I was with Bud.
Well, there was a few that sort of there was even, I had one with Jacobs, and people always think that everybody agreed. And I remember I met her in Tucson, and she was a chaplain in a hospice. And I found out she was in Jacobs' book, and I said, you were in his book? And then I said, but he's secular or whatever and stuff. He says, look, to make it this straight, just because I was in his book doesn't mean I agree with him. I mean, he had his belief about life after death or no life after death, whatever. He doesn't speak for me. And that was the sort of idea that we sort of lump all the people in, that everybody was the same under these things. And there was people that, had these, especially people who grew and developed the understanding that it was not what we saw at first. When you first see it, yeah, it looks very fearful. But you have the free survey where they ask the people, if you had a chance to stop this, would you stop it? And 83% of people say no, keep it going. And this
Well,
idea,
Bud's theories are Bud's theories, and I have developed my own theories
yeah,
over time in my age, but and I'm quite sure, like Bud wrote the foreword to Abducted, and I'm quite sure that some of the stuff that he read in there probably made him cringe, but he was gracious and kind to me, and he understood that I was on my journey and it was different than his, but he was always supportive to the very end. I loved him dearly, but he had a more negative feeling about the experiences than, and I did in the beginning. But once I overcame that, I mean, something was happening to me. Something was happening to me specifically, and things were happening to me for a purpose further down the road. And I grew into it, I guess. Bud was in the I always said he's in the emergency room of all this phenomenon. He sees the people that were completely wrecked like me, because I was completely wrecked. Once I woke up and remembered, it took me a long time to assimilate everything and get my feet, get my earth feet or whatever, you know what I mean?
yeah. Everybody's playing their role. Everybody's at their level. It's sort of like we always want to try to convince people. And I always talk about, like, Stanton Friedman. I did his, went to see his files, and Stanton went for 61 years and he argued with Klaas and all these other clowns. And when I got a realization when I got there that he never convinced any of them of anything. It's sort of like everybody's playing their role, and that it's almost like they said, science and ufology advance one funeral at a time. It's the young people will pick it up, and it's not so threatening to them. And the old people die off, and it just gradually moves along. It's not like you and I are going to suddenly say something and everybody's going to throw up the white flag and everybody's going to agree and go along with it.
No, I feel like I speak out publicly because I feel like there's one person out there that needs to hear something that I'm saying. I don't know if it's a word or a phrase or something. And then when they do, then I did what I came here to do. And that was, to help trigger them to start their journey,
Exactly. I firmly agree. That's what you're doing, and that's what I'm doing. And I think you're doing a wonderful job. Let's go to EVP time. Let's end it with this.
Okay.
You got into EVPs, and you have one that started you. Tell that little story, and then we'll go to the couple. I took about 3 of the ones that you sent me, and we'll play those. But tell me the one that got you going with was it your nephew was with you?
It was my nephew, and it was many, many, many years ago. I don't know what the attraction of EVPs was, but I decided to give it a try after reading something about it. And so I had a 30-minute on each side cassette and cassette tape player, and Billy and I just sat there in my kitchen in the quiet, and that's not easy. But when we went to play it back, there was a very clear voice on it, as if this man was in the house with us, and it was an old man. And he said, "Are the spirits listening?" And right behind him, immediately afterwards, was another voice of a younger person, almost like a little girl, saying, "Can I listen too?" And it was that moment that I had that epiphany. I'm like, oh my God, we're the spirits somewhere else, and somebody's trying to hear us, And then on the other side, there was a voice that sounded like Billy said, "Aunt Debbie, that sounds just like you." And the voice said, "Inanakama." And I thought, and it was like real happy and sing-songy the way she said it. And I thought, what the hell is that? And my nephew's like, "That sounds like you." And then we played it for my mom, and she's like, "It does sound like you." And I'm like, what does that mean? So for years and years and years, I've tried to figure out what that was, if it was a word or a phrase or something. And
Wow.
I ain't come up with nothing.
Okay, we're going to go. The first one we do is the one I like the best. Yeah, tell the story, because this backstory is, people have to understand what's actually going on to understand the importance of this.
Well, I was a member of a paranormal research group here at this time when this was done, and I actually have the video of the camera. You can see the dog walking past the table where the recorder was. The family that we were doing the investigation for had complained that there was a little girl that would run up and down the hall at night and wake everybody up. And they didn't have any little girls in the family. And it was a new house. It was a new build. So it wasn't like an old haunted house or anything. And they left the house. There was nobody there except for us researchers and the dog. And we had set up our base station out in the garage. And the dog would just roam around and we'd see it occasionally on the cameras. But as the dog walked past the table where the recorder was that recorded this voice is so vividly clear. It says, "Hi, Ginger." And it sounds like there's a little girl in the room talking to the dog, and the dog's name was Ginger. That's what really flipped everybody out. Holy cow, the dog's name is Ginger.
Okay, let's play it and see if it comes through clearly. Can you hear that well?
Yeah.
Hey, just one more time. I love it. Okay. So this one, what's the story on this one?
This is just I can't even remember which kind of, we were at a home doing a private investigation, and we recorded this say, "So Deb, what's up?" And then you can hear my buddy, my co-host when I did my podcast, and my cohort in investigations. He says, "So what's crack-a-lackin'?" Because that's what he says in response to that. "So Deb, what's up?"
Okay, let's play this.
What's crack-a-lacking?
One more time.
What's crack-a-lacking?
So you could hear this one.
What's crack-a-lacking?
Could you hear that? Could he hear it, the voice?
Yeah, he could hear it.
This is so wild. Okay,
Mhm.
here, tell this story.
Okay, we were at the Asher Walton House in Atlanta, Indiana, doing an investigation, and there was had been reports of little kids, little girls and little boys there playing with the ball. The investigators that stayed at the house there all the time, they would put balls out, and the house was wired with video, and they'd video record. They'd have the balls rolling up and down the hall at night and stuff. And I think somebody asked if there was a little girl here, and it says, "I got the pink shirt."
Okay, here we go.
Are you a
Big
female?
signal. No shit.
Are you a female? Are you a
Big
female?
signal. No shit.
Are you a female?
One more time.
Are you a
Big
female?
signal. No shit.
Are you a female?
I got a pink shirt.
Yeah, so they're
Big
asking, "Are you a
signal.
female?"
No shit.
Yeah.
Are you a
Wow. This one?
Oh, this was a private investigation, again, in a house that was empty. The family was getting ready to move. They built their own new house, but the house had been in the family for years and years, and several older members had passed away in there. And this voice, they ID'd this voice as one of the older members of the family that had passed away when we played it back for them. We asked them, did she have a doctor named Dr. Hubert? And they're like, we're not sure. She had so many doctors. We don't know how many, what they were called.
Okay. Hang on. Here we go.
too, but
Would you get an EVP every time you went out or every investigation?
Um, I got some almost every time.
Oh yeah,
There
that's the
might
other
be a
thing. It
time
was you're like the light. You're the lightning rod.
they used to call me the antenna. They'd always say, make sure Deb's here. Where's her stuff? I would usually get at least one or two really good ones like that. And then there might have been a couple of investigations where I didn't get what something that was that good, but there were things, there were a couple of there was one investigation where it almost sounded, that was very faint and it was repetitive, like it was almost like a signal that was being put out, and it would repeat 2 or 3 times the same phrase, and you could hear it, but it sounded very, 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 very far away. And those were odd. I had 2 or 3 like that, but they were, you probably couldn't hear them on here. You'd have to have them, with the headset on.
Yeah. Okay, and the last one I think here. Hang on. For people who may not think that people on the other side aren't interested in sports, tell this one.
Yeah, this we were at the Crump Theater in Columbus, Indiana, and we were down in the basement where the dressing rooms were, and there were, I think, 4 of us down there, and one of the guys that was with us had on a sports jersey with the number 16 on it, and I think it was green. I think we got an EVP later that said something about the green shirt or something, but as we were walking through the basement dressing areas, this is what we got, and it was funny.
So they're commenting on his shirt, right? One more time.
And there was nobody with us that sounded like that.
That's just amazing.
It is amazing. And see, I had a rule when we did EVP work: nobody whisper. If you want to say something, speak loudly, because I might not recognize your whisper, a week from now after listening to 12 hours of data, raw audio. So nobody whispered, and nobody was making any, we weren't talking as we walked through. We walked through in the quiet, and that voice was nobody that was with us that night.
Wow. And you, as you mentioned, maybe you mentioned or didn't mention, it was usually like the ginger one. You had a microphone on the camera, but it didn't pick up anything. It would usually be your cassette recorder that would pick up the EVP if it was like a good one, like the ginger one.
Yeah, the audio recording on the video camera, it didn't come through, but you could see, we synced up the recording from my recorder with the video, so you could see, the time, date, stamps on them, so we knew that was when the dog walked by. Yeah.
Wow.
There now, I mean, other people caught some stuff too, but it always seemed like mine was clearer. Now I had a good recorder. I use an H1 stereo recorder that has 2 mics that crisscross, and it is sensitive. You can hear somebody snoring 2 bedrooms away. But
wow. But you really don't do the EVP stuff that much anymore.
Well, I haven't done, no, I left that paranormal group, and then I started my own for a while, and then my buddy that I used to do it with moved away, and so I really haven't had an opportunity to do it very much. I'd like to get out and do some more of it, but COVID kind of threw a monkey wrench in them plans. So
and everybody,
now that I'm retired, I have time to do stuff like this, but no, right when I retired, COVID hit. So
what to sort of to shut down, I can basically say to you, your interview was as good as I thought it would be. And you've made it across through the wind and rain to the hill over my questions and stuff. And you're now at the top of the hill. And I'll say exactly what the guy says to you at the end. Okay, you did a wonderful job. It's time to go home. Perhaps you'll have a dream tonight and get an impression of where we go next. What are you planning to do? You've written Extraordinary Contact, which I think people absolutely have to read because you have more material. It's the old deal, like experiencers are the ones to listen to, and then there are certain experiencers who are like bright lights that have a lot of contact and a lot of messages. So I think people should read your new book. And what are you planning to do in the upcoming future?
Well, I'm hoping that COVID will recede enough that I can do some traveling, because I'd like to, go to some conferences. And I don't mind speaking in public anymore. Like I used to get real nervous about it. I do a little get nervous, but my best part is afterwards when I meet people. That's where I want to go so I can meet people, because I want to meet more people. I'll keep working on my website, probably going to work on that next book about the bus trip. And, just wherever the universe wants me to be, that's where I'll go. I just do what it asked me to do.
Yeah, the bus trip one, I think there's a story in there. It may be hidden, but there's something in there. So I really appreciate your taking the time. Maybe one last question. Have you had a lot of people, where would people contact you? Because I assume you've talked a lot of people off the cliff in terms of people who are where you were in 1983 when you went to see Bud. If you have experiencers, there'll be some people here who are still in the dark. I actually started a group here in Winnipeg called Experiences Anonymous, where it was built on AA, where people could come to a meeting. Nobody was allowed to ask anybody what they were doing there or what your experiences or whatever, to allow people to sit in a room and sit there for 2 years if they wanted and never say anything until someone actually said something that would trigger them and say, yeah, okay, I'm going to tell my story now. I'm ready to talk. Mm-hmm. Have you had people come to you, and how would they contact you if they have, say, they're where you were in 1983 and they want help from you?
They can reach me on my website. There's a place there where you can email me. And so just come to my website and, you can read whatever stuff I have up there, and you can send me an email. And I don't have a lot of answers sometimes, but I'm a really good listener. And it's a safe place where you can come and share. And I don't put anything on my website from other people. It's just between me and you. But yeah, so they can reach me at my website. It's www.debshome.com. And I'm also on Facebook, but I don't get on there a whole lot, and it's on Facebook, I'm Deb White Kauble. White is my maiden name. I put that on there so all my old school chums could find me.
Yeah. Wonderful. Maybe I don't do much traveling because I have a hard time from Homeland Security for stealing American jobs, so I don't really lecture, but I may be at Ozark, so maybe we can get you at Ozark, because that's probably fairly close to you. There's a lot of people come down there, and I think you did speak at Ozark one time.
I've been there a couple times. That was the very first place that I ever spoke publicly that my whole family went down and listened, which was nice. And I have good memories from there. That place is wonderful. I love the vibe there. I feel comfortable there.
Yeah.
So,
and that's a lot of people for some place out in the middle of nowhere.
Yes, it is.
They come from that area of the country. So hopefully we'll see you on the road somewhere.
Oh, that'd be great.
When you figure out something, let me know what your messages are, because I listen extremely careful to everything you say, because as I said at the beginning, there are certain people that we need to listen to. We don't need to listen to the government. I don't think they have a clue. There may be one or two people who know what's going on, but it's the experiencers, and it is us. We are the ones we've been waiting for. So thank you for allowing me to interview you, to ask these questions. And thank you for the material you put out. It was a tough road, but I think a lot of people have been helped by you, and you've done for others what Bud did for you. And that's what we've got to do. The people who have the answers have to start speaking out, and eventually the people who need to listen will hear, and we will move towards whatever it is they want us to move towards. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for allowing me to be here tonight. I appreciate it.